Hey everyone! Welcome back to Watch Harry. Get ready for an amazing tale. What if Harry bonded with a dragon at age 5 and every dragon species declared war on Dumbledore for abuse? Smash that like button and subscribe for more. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Garden. The garden at number 4, Privet Drive was the kind of place that existed purely to be admired from a distance. Petunia Dursley maintained it with the obsessive precision of someone who believed that a perfectly edged lawn could communicate moral superiority to the neighbors. Every flower was planted in rows. Every hedge was trimmed to the same height. Even the garden gnomes, which weren't real garden gnomes, just ceramic ones, because Petunia would sooner move to Scotland than tolerate magical pests, stood at exactly measured intervals along the front path. Harry Potter was not allowed in the front garden. He was, however, currently running through the back one, vaulting the fence at the far end with the practiced ease of a boy who had been doing exactly this since he was 4. Behind him, Dudley's gang thundered across the grass, 4 boys, all of them bigger than Harry, all of them red-faced and furious because Harry had somehow, again, ended up on the wrong side of a game that had never really been a game at all. "Get him!" Dudley bellowed, which was unnecessary since they were all already running, but Dudley had always preferred narrating things he was involved in. Harry hit the tree line at the back of the neighborhood, a strip of old woodland that the council had been threatening to develop for years and somehow never gotten around to, and kept going. The trees swallowed him. Behind him, he heard Dudley's gang slow at the edge, because the woods were dark even at midday and Dudley, for all his size, had always been frightened of the dark. Harry wasn't frightened of much. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because the things that happened inside the house at Privet Drive were so much more immediate and reliable than anything the dark might produce, and he'd learned early that the monsters you could see were easier to deal with than the ones you imagined. He slowed to a walk once he was sure they weren't following. The woods smelled like wet earth and old leaves and something else, something sharp and hot, like the moment before a kettle boiled over. Harry had never smelled anything like it before. He followed it without really deciding to, ducking under a low branch, stepping over a root that had cracked through the earth like a fist, until he found the hollow. It was a natural depression in the ground, ringed by 3 old oaks that had grown together at the top, their branches interlocking into a canopy that kept the space below dry and dim. And in the hollow, curled around itself in a shape that was clearly meant to be defensive but was currently just sad, was the most extraordinary thing Harry had ever seen. It was a dragon. Not a big one. About the size of a large cat, maybe a bit longer, with a tail that curled twice around its own body. Its scales were black, not the dull black of a painted surface but the deep, light-eating black of a night sky far from any city, scales that caught what little light filtered through the canopy and gave nothing back. Its wings were folded tight against its sides, which Harry could see even at 5 years old was wrong. Wings should spread. Something was stopping this one from spreading. One of them was torn. A long gash ran along the left wing membrane, dark with dried blood that had gone almost purple. Harry crouched at the edge of the hollow. The dragon's eyes were closed. Its sides heaved in a way that didn't look restful, more like the way Harry breathed when he was trying very hard not to cry and didn't want anyone to notice. "Hey," Harry said. The eyes opened. They were orange. Not a muddy orange or a pale one but the color of the core of a fire, the hottest part, the part that burned silver white at the edges. The dragon looked at him with those eyes and Harry felt something happen in his chest, not a physical thing, not a pain, but a shift, like a door opening in a room he hadn't known existed. The dragon didn't move. It watched him. "You're hurt," Harry said. The dragon blinked. Slowly. The way cats blinked sometimes, which Harry had always liked even though the Dursleys didn't allow cats and the neighbor's tabby that sometimes sat on the fence was the closest he'd gotten to one. "I'm not going to hurt you," Harry said. He wasn't sure why he felt the need to say that. The dragon was the one with fire. "Can I look?" He moved closer. The dragon's eyes tracked him but it didn't rear back or bare teeth, which Harry took as permission. He crouched beside the torn wing, close enough to feel the heat radiating off the scales. The dragon ran warm, much warmer than he'd expected, like a stone that had been sitting in sunlight all day. The wing membrane up close was extraordinary, thin as paper but clearly not fragile, a deep charcoal gray that shaded to near black at the edges. The tear was bad. Not fatal, Harry thought, though he had no idea why he thought he knew anything about dragon wounds. It just felt true the way some things felt true, the way he'd always known that if he stood on the highest stair in the school stairwell and let his hand brush the wall, the lights would flicker, or that the day before it rained he could feel it coming in his teeth. He pulled off his jacket, a cast-off of Dudley's, 3 sizes too big, which meant it was still slightly too big for most normal children Harry's age, and folded it carefully. He set it next to the dragon's head. The dragon looked at it. Then at Harry. "You can rest on that," Harry said. "If you want. It's warmer than the ground." The dragon looked at the jacket for a long moment. Then, very slowly, it shifted its head onto the folded fabric. Its eyes stayed on Harry. Harry sat cross-legged in the hollow and the dragon watched him and Harry watched the dragon, and after a while he felt the door in his chest open wider, and something that was not words but was close to them moved through that opening, something that tasted like smoke and old stone and the smell of the sky after lightning, something that carried an emotion he didn't have a word for yet, which was closer to recognize than anything else. He reached out his hand. The dragon pressed its nose against his palm. The world went very white and very quiet. When Harry came back to himself he was still sitting in the hollow, but the light had changed, the afternoon had deepened while he'd been wherever he'd been, and the dragon was sitting up, watching him with those ember eyes, its injured wing extended slightly as though it had forgotten it was torn. "Veyra," something said, in the space behind his thoughts. "Veyra," Harry said aloud. It felt right in his mouth. Like a word he'd always known and just now remembered. "Is that your name?" The feeling that came back was confirmation and amusement in equal measure. "I'm Harry," he said. The dragon, Veyra, made a sound low in her throat that was somewhere between a purr and a distant roll of thunder. It vibrated in Harry's sternum in a way that felt, inexplicably, like being welcomed home. He stayed until the light went to purple-gray and he knew he'd missed dinner and that there would be consequences for that. Then he took his jacket back from under Veyra's head, she allowed this with the dignity of someone granting a significant favor, and stood. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said. She looked at him. The ember eyes were steady. "Promise," he added, which he'd never said to anyone before and meant absolutely. He ran home through the dark woods and didn't feel scared once. The consequences were exactly what he'd expected, sent to his cupboard without dinner, which was most nights anyway, so the distinction was largely philosophical. He lay on his narrow cot with his hands behind his head and stared at the underside of the stairs above him and thought about orange eyes and the feeling of a door opening and the word recognized, and he felt, for the first time in his 5 years of life, like something had gone right. He went back the next day. And the day after that. By the end of the first week, Veyra's wing had healed, not gradually but abruptly, the way his own scrapes and bruises always healed faster than they should, which the school nurse had once called remarkable and Uncle Vernon had called freakish and Harry called useful. He'd pressed his hand to the torn membrane on the 3rd day, not really thinking about it, just doing it because it seemed like the right thing to do, and the warmth that had moved between his palm and the wing felt like the same thing that had opened the door in his chest, and by the morning of the 4th day the tear was gone. Veyra could fly. The first time she did it, launching herself off the root of one of the old oaks, wings snapping open with a sound like a sail catching wind, Harry laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that surprised him coming out because he wasn't used to making it. She spiraled up through the canopy and then came back down and landed on his shoulder, which was not comfortable given her claws, but he bore it gladly. "You healed me," she said, in that not-words way. "Do you know what that means?" "No," Harry said. "It means we are bound," she said. "Not just because of the touch. Because you chose to. Because I chose to let you. The bond has 2 doors, Harry Potter. Both have to open. Okay, Harry said. He was 5. The metaphysics were a bit beyond him. Does it mean you'll stay? The feeling that came back was something so absolutely, firmly, irrevocably yes that it felt less like an answer than a law of nature. Good, Harry said, and scratched her behind what turned out to be a very sensitive spot just behind her left ear ridge, and Veyra made the thunderpurr sound and dug her claws gently into his shoulder, and that was that. The trouble started 3 weeks in, because trouble always did. Dudley had followed him. Not out of bravery, Dudley had no bravery in the woods, but out of a combination of spite and the fact that Piers Polkiss had dared him to, and Dudley had never been able to refuse a dare that involved someone else suffering for it. He'd waited at the tree line, watched Harry go in, and fetched his father. Vernon Dursley was a large man in the way that geological formations were large, present, immovable, and apparently permanent. He arrived at the hollow in the late afternoon with Dudley behind him and a look on his face that Harry recognized immediately as the precursor to something very bad. Veyra was on Harry's lap, her wings half spread in the late sun, and she was doing the thing she sometimes did where she breathed out small controlled plumes of silver-white flame and Harry held his hand in them. They didn't burn him, had never burned him, which was one of the many things about their bond that suggested it was doing something to his magic, when Vernon pushed through the low branches and stopped dead. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then Vernon said, in the careful voice of a man trying to contain something enormous, "Dudley. Go home." "But Dad, now." Dudley went. Slowly, watching over his shoulder. Vernon looked at Veyra. Veyra looked at Vernon. Her ember eyes were very steady and very bright, and even at this size, she'd grown slightly in 3 weeks, was closer to a medium-sized dog now than a cat. She had an air about her that had nothing to do with size. It was the air of something that had existed in forms much larger than this and knew it could again. "That," Vernon said, "is going back where it came from." "She lives here," Harry said. "In the woods. It's an animal. A dangerous animal. And you've been sneaking out to play with it. She's not an animal." Harry wasn't shouting. His voice was very flat and very calm in a way that, looking back later, he'd understand was the bond working through him, Veyra's steadiness flowing into him through the connection they shared, grounding him in the way that a deep root grounds a tree in a storm. "And she's mine. Nothing in this world is yours, boy," Vernon said, and his voice had dropped to that low register that Harry knew meant the worst kind of anger, the cold deliberate kind. "You own nothing. You are nothing. And that thing is dangerous and you'll," he reached down. For Veyra. What happened next was not something Harry planned or intended or even consciously did. What happened was that Vernon's hand came within 6 inches of Veyra, and Veyra's head snapped around and her eyes flared from ember orange to pure white, and Harry felt the door in his chest blow open like a window in a hurricane, and the air in the hollow went from cool evening to scorching in the space of half a breath, and every leaf on every branch above them curled and blackened at the edges, and the ground under Vernon's feet cracked in a perfect circle, and a sound came out of Harry. That was not a scream and not a word but something older than either, something that shook the trees down to their roots and sent every bird in the woodland off the branches at once in an explosion of wings. Vernon stumbled back 3 full steps. His face had gone from red to white so fast it was almost funny. Veyra settled back onto Harry's lap. The white faded from her eyes. She flicked her tail once, with the air of someone who had made their point and considered the matter concluded. Harry was breathing hard. He looked at his own hands, they were shaking slightly, but not with fear. With the aftershock of something immense moving through something too small to hold all of it yet. "Don't touch her," Harry said. His voice was still very calm. "Ever." Vernon stared at him. Vernon was a man who had strong beliefs about the natural order of things, and the natural order of things included the certainty that a 5-year-old boy from a cupboard under the stairs did not get to make demands of him. But something had just happened in this hollow that had bent all of Vernon's certainty sideways, and the look on his face now was not anger. It was fear. He left without another word. Which was new? Harry looked down at Veyra. Was that me or you? Both, she said. That is what the bond means. When you protect me, your magic protects me. When I protect you, mine protects you. We are not separate anymore in the ways that matter. Uncle Vernon is going to be horrible about this, Harry said. Yes, Veyra said, with the complete equanimity of someone who found this entirely acceptable. Let him try. Vernon was not horrible, exactly. He was strategic, which was worse. He called a man. The man arrived 2 days later in a dark car, wearing a dark jacket, carrying what appeared to be a large reinforced cage with multiple locks and what Harry, even at 5, recognized as magical suppression runes scratched clumsily into the metal. The man smelled wrong. Not bad, exactly, more like the absence of something that should be there. He had small eyes and a mouth that smiled independently of his face. I understand you've been having a problem, the man said to Vernon, at the kitchen table, while Harry stood in the doorway because no one had thought to send him away and Harry had learned early to be quiet enough that adults forgot he was there. The creature, Vernon said. It needs to be dealt with. Properly. Removed. Shouldn't be a problem, the man said. These things, young ones especially, before they're properly mobile, it's just a matter of the right approach. A bit of suppressant in the air, they go right to sleep. We've done it dozens of times. Harry, Veyra said, in his head, sharp and urgent. There is a man coming to the woods tonight. Harry was already moving. He was out the back door before Vernon registered that he'd been standing there. He ran for the tree line and didn't slow and he hit the hollow at a dead run and Veyra was on her feet, wings spread, eyes fully white, and she was bigger, noticeably bigger than she'd been that morning, as though the threat had triggered something, some growth acceleration, and she was the size of a Great Dane now, maybe larger. And when Harry threw himself into the hollow she lowered her head and he grabbed the ridge above her ears the way he'd seen in the books he'd been sneaking out of. The school library, the ones about dragons that were shelved in the mythology section because wizards and the ministry between them had done a thorough job of convincing the non-magical world that dragons weren't real. Hold tight, she said. Where are we going? Away from here, she said. For now. Not forever. Promise? He was breathing hard and the woods were darkening and somewhere behind him he could hear Vernon shouting his name, which was new. Usually Vernon avoided using his name because it implied a degree of acknowledgement he wasn't comfortable with. Not forever, she said again, with certainty. You cannot run from your life, Harry. But you can choose when to go back to it. She was right. He knew she was right. He was 5 and he already understood, in the bones of himself, that number 4 Privet Drive was not escape-able, not permanently, not yet. But right now, in this moment, with her scales warm under his hands and her wings opening against the darkening sky, okay, he said. Not forever. She launched. The ground fell away. The woods shrank. The row of identical houses on Privet Drive became a pattern, then a detail, then a small thing in a large world. Harry pressed his face against Veyra's neck and felt the wind and smelled smoke and cold air and the particular electric smell of her, and laughed again, that surprised laugh, the good one, and somewhere below him Vernon Dursley was shouting into an empty woods. They were gone until dawn. When Harry came back, it was alone. Veyra had taken him far enough out that no one would find her, a location she'd scouted herself, a cave system in the hills that she said smelled of old dragon sign, safe, and then returned him to the edge of the woods at first light with the calm certainty of someone dropping a child off at school. The man with the cage was gone. The cage itself was in the garden, and it was melted. Not structurally compromised. Melted. From the inside. In a pattern that suggested something had sat in it and breathed very deliberately. Veyra had gone back while Harry slept, apparently. And delivered a message. Vernon looked at Harry across the breakfast table with the expression of a man who has made certain calculations and arrived at an answer he deeply dislikes. He never touched Harry again. Not that morning, not ever. He didn't become kind. Kindness was not in Vernon's nature and Harry neither expected nor wanted it. But something had shifted in the balance of the house at Privet Drive, quietly and permanently, and Harry understood that this was also what Veyra had meant by protection. The years that followed were not easy. They were not supposed to be easy. But they were different from what they might have been. Harry grew. Veyra grew with him, which meant there were logistical challenges. By the time he was 7 she could no longer fit comfortably in the hollow, though she refused to acknowledge this, and had to curl in a way that was increasingly contorted and that she maintained with enormous dignity. By 8, she spent her days in the hills and came to him at night, slipping through his window with a wingspan that barely cleared the frame, folding herself impossibly small to lie across the foot of his bed in a shape that somehow avoided taking up any space that Harry needed. She brought others. The first came when Harry was 6, a Norwegian ridgeback, enormous and ancient, who arrived at the edge of the woods one morning and stood there until Harry came to see what Veyra was so insistently tugging him toward. The ridgeback was scarred in ways that suggested decades of living, its horn-ridged head held low in what Harry would later learn was the dragon version of a formal greeting. It looked at him for a long time. Then it looked at Veyra. Then it made a sound like a landslide and left. It came to confirm, Veyra told him. The bond sign is visible in the dragon line. They all know you exist now. What's the dragon line? The network, she said. Old magic. Dragons have always lived in it. You can feel the edges of it, through me, when you try. He tried. He found it, a sense of something vast and interconnected, like pressing your hand against a wall and feeling the whole structure of the building behind it. Not accessible to him, not really, but present. Aware of him. They know I'm here, he said. They know you are bonded, she said. Which is much more significant. More came. Sporadically, with the randomness of significant things, a Chinese fireball who circled overhead for a full afternoon before landing long enough to study Harry with copper eyes and then departing, a pair of Welsh greens who stayed for 3 days, one of whom communicated with him in something closer to actual language than Veyra's emotion impressions, though her voice had a quality like music heard through stone, slow and old. He learned from all of them. Not formal lessons, dragons didn't teach the way schools taught, but through proximity, through the dragon line, through doing things alongside them and absorbing what doing those things required. He learned to read the old runes first. They appeared in his mind like images accompanying Veyra's not words, and he found books in the school library that confirmed them, supplementary books, written in languages he'd had to learn to access, but learn them he did, because the Dursleys had given him no reason to be at home and the library had long opening hours. He learned to channel the heat of the bond through his own magic, not fire, exactly, his fire was different from normal wizarding magic, richer and less structured, more like the thing that moved through the dragon line than the thing that moved through wands. He read everything he could find on both dragons and magic. At 8, he asked Veyra something he'd been holding since he was 5. The people who come to the school sometimes, he said. The ones in the funny robes. One of them talked to me last month. She said I was magical. That there was a school. Yes, Veyra said. You knew? We always knew, she said. Your mother was magical. Your father was magical. You are very magical. This is not a surprise. There's a whole world, Harry said. Isn't there? One I don't know about. One you will enter, she said. When the time comes. When? When you are 11, she said. They will send a letter. What happens until then? She turned those ember eyes on him, and the feeling that came through the bond was something like preparation and something like patience and something like the specific, quiet satisfaction of a long process going exactly as it should. You grow, she said simply. He grew. By 9, Harry Potter was not the boy the Dursleys had expected to produce. He was small for his age, the nutrition situation at Privet Drive had been aggressively mediocre, but he moved with an ease that had nothing to do with size, the ease of someone who spent significant time around creatures that made their surroundings feel like they should be grateful the creatures were there at all. His eyes, which were his mother's eyes and had always been unsettlingly direct for a child's, had taken on a quality that several of his teachers had mentioned in reports, using words like unnervingly composed and mature beyond his years, and, from his third-grade teacher who had been unusually perceptive, seems to be listening to something we can't hear. He was usually Veyra's running commentary on the behavior of whatever humans were currently in the room, which was frequently uncharitable and almost always accurate. At 10, the old Welsh Green who communicated in slow stone music came back. She stayed for 6 days that time, and what she gave him in those 6 days wasn't exactly teaching but was closer to it than anything else the dragons had offered, specifically, a framework for understanding what the bond was doing to his magic. It was making it bigger, was the simple version. More precisely, the bond connected him to the dragon line, which predated all formal magical systems by millennia, and the dragon line was not a human-scale thing. His magic was growing to accommodate the connection. This was not something that had happened before, at least not in recorded history. "You are the first," the Welsh Green told him. Her name, as close as he could render it, was something like Mira. The first bond in 3 centuries. The first human Shadowfire bond in longer than memory. "What does that mean for me?" Harry asked. "It means," Mira said, slow and careful, "that the things that have been done to you, the small things and the larger ones, are not invisible to us. We see through you. Through the bond. We see what that house is. What was decided for you before you could decide anything yourself." Harry was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean, decided for you?" "Someone placed you there deliberately," she said. "Not just out of necessity. Out of design." He held that. The ember in his chest, Veyra's part of him, banked low and hot in a way that wasn't anger exactly but was its cooler, more permanent relative. "Tell me what you know," he said. Mira told him. Not everything, she was a dragon, not a spy, and her knowledge was the knowledge of old observation and the Dragonline's impressions rather than hard intelligence. But enough. A name, placed in his mind with the weight of stone. Dumbledore. Impressions of deliberate choices, of a boy placed in a loveless house because a loving house would produce the wrong kind of soldier. Of a prophecy used as a weapon. Of suffering catalogued and permitted because it was useful. Harry sat with this for a long time. "Okay," he said eventually. Mira regarded him. "You are not going to rage?" "Not yet," Harry said. "There's no one to rage at right now. And rage is for when you don't have a plan." He looked up at her. "We have time. Until the letter comes." "And then?" "Then I go learn what I need to learn," Harry said. "And I make sure the things that need to be fixed get fixed. That's all." Mira watched him with the eyes of a creature who had seen centuries, and what was in those eyes when she looked at him was something that in a human might have been called pride. "You were worth bonding," she said. "Veyra chose well." "I chose her back," Harry said. "That's how it works." "Yes," Mira said. "That is exactly how it works." The letter arrived on Harry's 11th birthday. He'd been expecting it, Veyra had told him when, not because she had precise knowledge but because she could feel the institutional magic of Hogwarts reaching for him through the dragon line in the way large standing spells did, but even knowing it was coming didn't make holding it feel less significant. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the envelope read. In green ink. On parchment that was clearly not supermarket paper. Harry turned it over in his hands. Veyra was on his shoulder, her current preferred transit size, about the size of a large crow, which was her minimum comfortable compression and which she maintained with practiced ease, and he could feel her attention sharpening through the bond. "Well," she said. "Well," Harry agreed. He opened it. "Read it. Read the supply list." Looked at the separate letter that had arrived alongside it, from Dumbledore personally, welcoming him in terms that managed to be both warm and somehow proprietary, as if welcoming him back to something he'd always owned a piece of. Harry set that one down on the kitchen table and looked at it for a moment. "He thinks he knows me," Harry said quietly. "He thinks he made you," Veyra said. "There is a difference." "Yes," Harry said. "There is." He packed that same afternoon. He didn't have much: books he'd accumulated from the school library and from the second-hand shops he'd saved pocket money for, the few clothes that fit, the journal he'd been keeping since he was 7, a collection of small runestones the dragons had brought him from places he'd never been. He didn't ask the Dursleys for money for school supplies because asking the Dursleys for anything was a transaction he'd long since stopped engaging in. He had his own savings, carefully accumulated. He'd go to Diagon Alley himself. He was standing at the front door with his bag on his shoulder when Petunia came out of the kitchen and stopped. She looked at him. She looked at Veyra, who was on his shoulder and watching her with ember eyes that had never once in 6 years looked anything other than completely and utterly unbothered by Petunia Dursley. Petunia opened her mouth. "Thank you for the roof," Harry said, because he had decided, carefully and deliberately, that he would leave this house without cruelty even if he left it without warmth. "I won't be coming back for Christmas." He stepped out the front door. Onto the perfectly edged path between the perfectly planted rows. Into the morning. He didn't look back. "Ready?" Veyra asked. Harry felt the dragon line hum beneath everything, vast and old and connected to something in his chest that was as much her as it was him, and felt the echo of 5 elder dragons somewhere at the edges of perception, aware of him, watching this moment with the patience of creatures who measured time in centuries. "Yes," he said. He walked down Privet Drive for the last time, and the sun was out, and his shadow on the pavement was sharp and clear, and ahead of him was everything he hadn't learned yet, which was considerable, but had never once felt frightening. Veyra's claws settled on his shoulder, light as the touch of someone you trust, and the bond between them hummed with something that was satisfaction and readiness and the particular quality of a long, quiet preparation meeting its moment at last. Harry Potter was going to Diagon Alley. And after that, Hogwarts. And after that, well. After that, a great many people were going to discover that the boy they'd been managing and planning around and treating as a piece on a board had spent the last 6 years becoming something else entirely. He was looking forward to it. Chapter 2, The Shadow Fire arrives at Hogwarts. Diagon Alley was loud in the way that places are loud when they've never considered being anything else. The shouts of vendors, the clatter of cauldrons being stacked, the particular sharp crack of apparition that punctuated everything else like an irregular heartbeat. Harry stood at the entrance to the leaky cauldron and let it wash over him for a moment, cataloguing it the way Mira had taught him to catalogue new environments, exits, concentrations of magic, the emotional temperature of the crowd. The emotional temperature of Diagon Alley, he discovered, was complicated. People kept looking at him. Not the casual glance of strangers passing in a busy street but something more arrested, a look that started as normal and then snagged, held, became something between recognition and disbelief. A witch in emerald robes dropped her shopping bag. A wizard with a white beard actually walked into a lamp post. "Your scar," Veyra said from his shoulder, where she was currently shaped like something that could plausibly be mistaken for an unusually glossy raven, if you didn't look too closely at the eyes. "They can see it." Harry reached up and touched his forehead. The lightning bolt scar had been there his whole life. He'd stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing any feature of your own face. "They know who I am," he said. "They know who they think you are," she said. "Which is different." He walked through it, through the staring and the whispers and the one woman who grabbed his hand and said, "God bless you, dear," with tears in her eyes, which was unsettling in a way that the staring wasn't, and got his business done efficiently. Gringotts first, where the goblins treated him with the particular professional courtesy of creatures who respected the ability to project composure, and where he discovered that his vault contained considerably more than he'd expected, which raised questions he filed away for later. He moved through the supply list with the methodical thoroughness of someone who had been planning this trip for months, which he had. Madame Malkin's was where things got interesting. There was another boy already being fitted when Harry arrived, blonde, pale, with the kind of posture that was less natural confidence and more the result of being told repeatedly that posture was important. He looked at Harry with the frank assessment of someone who had been taught to assess people by their bloodline and family name and found them wanting or worthy accordingly. "Hogwarts too?" the boy said. "Yes," Harry said. He climbed onto the stool Madame Malkin indicated and held his arms out. "My name's Malfoy. Draco Malfoy." There was a beat, the kind of beat that expected recognition or a reciprocal declaration of impressive lineage. "Harry Potter." The beat turned into a silence of a different quality entirely. The boy, Draco, stared at him. Harry watched Madame Malkin's pins in the mirror. "You're serious," Draco said. "Usually." Draco recovered quickly, which suggested he was smarter than the posture implied. "I didn't know what you'd look like. There aren't pictures." "I know." Harry glanced at him in the mirror. "You're a Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy's son. You know my father?" "I know the name. I've been reading." He paused. "He supported Voldemort." The seamstress pins scattered. Several other customers flinched. Draco went rigid. "You shouldn't say that name," he said, and his voice was still controlled but something had shifted in it. "Why not?" Harry said, genuinely curious. "He's a person. Or was. Names are just sounds." He looked at Draco directly, not aggressively but with the complete absence of any social deference that Draco was clearly expecting. "Does the sound actually bother you, or is it just what you've been told to feel?" Draco stared at him. On Harry's shoulder, disguised as a raven, Veyra opened one eye, just one, ember orange in the fitting room's soft light, and regarded Draco with the expression of someone watching an experiment. "You're strange," Draco said. He didn't sound offended. He sounded, underneath the control, interested, and uncertain what to do with the interest. "Probably," Harry agreed pleasantly. He paid for his robes and left. Behind him, he was aware of Draco watching him go with the expression of someone encountering a puzzle that their existing frameworks don't quite accommodate. "He'll be trouble," Veyra said. "He'll be interesting," Harry said. "Which is different." The wand was the last stop. Ollivander's was dim and strange and smelled of sawdust and something deeper, something that reminded him of the edges of the dragon line, old concentrated intention, the residue of power shaped and stored. The old wand maker came out from between his towers of boxes and looked at Harry with eyes that were very pale and very sharp. "I wondered when I'd see you," Ollivander said. "Harry Potter." He tilted his head. "And something else." Veyra, on Harry's shoulder, tilted her head back. Her disguise held but her eyes, she couldn't quite keep her eyes ordinary. "Extraordinary," Ollivander breathed. He was looking at the eyes. "Shadowfire. I haven't seen the bond mark since, well. Not in my lifetime." He refocused on Harry. "Your parents, your mother used vine wood and dragon heartstring, 10 3/4 inches. Your father, mahogany, 11 inches, pliable. And you," he pulled out his measuring tape, "you will be something else entirely, I think." The wand that eventually chose Harry was unusual by any measure. Holly, 11 inches, with a core that Ollivander described as he wrapped it, phoenix feather, from a bird that had only ever given 2 feathers, but there was something else, something Ollivander did before he handed it over, a small addition, a modification made with the quick certainty of someone following an instinct they trusted. "A single scale," Ollivander said, holding up something tiny and impossibly black, which he worked into the handle's inlay with tools Harry couldn't follow. "Shadowfire Drake, shed scale, I've had this for 40 years and never understood why I kept it. Now I do." He held out the wand. Harry took it. The warmth that moved through him was not the wandmaker's warmth, the textbook holly and phoenix feather resonance, but something doubled, layered, the wand's magic and the bond's magic meeting each other and finding they spoke the same language. Sparks came off it, but they weren't red or gold. They were silver-white, Veyra's color, and they smelled like her. "Well," Ollivander said quietly. "That's that, then." "What is?" Harry asked. "The wand didn't choose you," Ollivander said. He looked pleased in the way of someone witnessing something they expected but still delights in. "You and the wand recognized each other." "Small difference." "Very significant difference." He accepted Harry's coins with the air of someone who considers the money the least interesting part of the transaction. "Take care of it. It's the only one of its kind." "I know how that feels," Harry said. He walked out into the afternoon, wand in his pocket, Veyra warm on his shoulder, and the whole of Diagon Alley still watching him from careful distances. He ignored it the way he had always ignored things that weren't his problem yet, and went to find a book about the history of Hogwarts, because he believed in knowing the terrain. The Hogwarts Express left from platform 9 3/4 on the 1st of September. Harry arrived early, stepping through the barrier with the easy confidence of someone who had read exactly how it worked and found the mechanism interesting rather than alarming. The Scarlet engine was already there, breathing steam into the morning air, and the platform was beginning to fill with families and trunks and owls and the particular emotional atmosphere of a transition, excitement and anxiety and the specific grief of parents watching children leave. Harry had none of that. He had Veyra in his jacket pocket, compressed to her minimum size, which was approximately the size of a large mouse and which she tolerated with great dignity, and his trunk in the rack and a seat claimed in a compartment near the middle of the train. He had a book out by the time the platform was fully crowded. The compartment door slid open. He looked up. A girl with large brown eyes and an enormous amount of very bushy hair looked around the compartment, registered him, and said, with the directness of someone who had decided social hesitation was inefficient, "Do you mind? Everywhere else is full." "Go ahead," Harry said. She sat down across from him, arranged a stack of books beside her with the focused efficiency of someone who had also arrived with a reading plan, and then looked at him with the slightly assessing expression he was beginning to recognize as what people did when they thought they recognized him and weren't sure how to handle it. "You're Harry Potter," she said. "Yes. I'm Hermione Granger." She said it in the slightly braced way of someone who has gotten used to that particular introduction not landing with any weight. "I've read about you. Well, about what you did when you were a baby. There isn't much written about you as a person." "I know. I've read almost all the school books already. And several supplementary texts." She seemed to decide something. "I'm Muggle-born. I've been trying to learn as much as possible before we arrive." "Good strategy," Harry said. He meant it. "What have you found most useful?" She blinked. Clearly she'd expected something other than genuine engagement. Then something shifted in her face, a kind of relief, the relief of someone who has been in rooms full of people who found her annoying and has just encountered someone who doesn't. "The history, actually," she said. "Particularly the founding period. The magical theory underlying the school structure is," she stopped, because something in Harry's jacket pocket had moved. The pocket bulged in a direction pockets shouldn't bulge, and then a small black head appeared, triangular, scaled, with ears that were almost cat-like and eyes that were extremely, unmistakably orange. Hermione stared. "This is Veyra," Harry said. "She gets bored when people talk about interesting things and she's not included." "I do not get bored," Veyra said, in Harry's head, sounding offended. "You literally just pushed your head out of my pocket," Harry said back. "I was checking the atmospheric conditions." Hermione was leaning forward, her reading completely abandoned. That's a dragon. That's a miniature dragon. How, they're not on the approved familiar list, and the logistics of," she stopped herself visibly. "She? You said she." "She," Harry confirmed. How does that work? The size, I mean. Dragons aren't, they can't naturally, it's a bond thing, Harry said. She can compress. It's not comfortable but she can do it. He looked at Veyra. You can relax. She's fine. Veyra climbed out of the pocket with the dignity of a queen disembarking from a carriage and settled on Harry's knee, where she spread her wings once. They spanned maybe 18 inches at this size, and then folded them and looked at Hermione with calm appraisal. Hermione held very still. Can she understand me? Yes. Can she communicates with me directly. Not with anyone else, usually, though she's been known to make exceptions. He looked at Veyra. She's going to Hogwarts to learn. She knows a great deal and she wants to know more. She's not a threat. I am absolutely a threat, Veyra said. I simply choose not to be one currently. Harry didn't translate this. Hermione exhaled slowly. Okay, she said. Then, she's extraordinary. She is, Harry agreed. Veyra, with immense dignity, allowed Hermione to look more closely. Not touch, not yet, but look. And something happened in the compartment that Harry had learned to pay attention to, the particular quality of two sharp minds meeting each other and recognizing the meeting as worthwhile. He sat back and watched it happen. The compartment door opened again about an hour out of London. This time it was a round-faced boy with the expression of someone who has been quietly catastrophizing about something for several hours and has just managed to narrow it down to one specific catastrophe. I don't suppose you've seen a toad, he said. I've lost Trevor. He's a toad. He could be anywhere and the train, he stopped. He was looking at Veyra. Veyra looked back at him with complete neutrality. Trevor hasn't come this way, Harry said. Sit down, you've been walking the whole train, you look exhausted. He'll turn up. The boy sat down, visibly grateful for the permission to stop moving. Neville, he said. Neville Longbottom. Harry. This is Hermione. That's Veyra. He paused. She's a dragon. Oh, Neville said. He looked at her for a moment. Then, she's beautiful, actually. Veyra's ember eyes shifted from neutral assessment to something distinctly warmer. She regarded Neville with the particular quality of attention she reserved for people she'd decided mattered. He has good instincts, she said. Most people express fear or fascination. He expressed appreciation. Harry looked at Neville, who was now sitting with the cautious ease of someone who has been told to sit down and found the sitting down better than expected. He had the magic of someone who hadn't been allowed to use it properly. Harry could feel it through the bond, the dragon line picking up the shape of potential the way it always did near magical people, and what he felt in Neville was something large and unsure of itself, like a river that's been channeled too narrow for its actual volume. You're Longbottom, Harry said. Your parents were Aurors. Neville's face did something complicated. Yes. Harry didn't push. He knew when something was a wound and when it needed space. You'll be good in herbology, he said instead, and wasn't sure how he knew that but was certain it was true. There was something in Neville's magic that matched things that grew, a fundamental compatibility. I can feel it. Neville stared at him. You can feel, how? It's a bond thing, Harry said. I'll explain sometime. But you're going to be good at it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Neville looked at him with the expression of someone who wants very badly to believe something they've been prevented from believing for a long time. Harry held his gaze steadily and meant it, and after a moment something settled in Neville's shoulders, a small settling, barely perceptible, but real. Trevor the Toad reappeared from somewhere under the seat, to universal relief. The remaining hours to Hogwarts passed in a way Harry hadn't entirely anticipated, pleasantly. Hermione had strong opinions about magical history and wasn't afraid to voice them, which Harry liked. Neville knew things about plants that turned out to be genuinely interesting when you stopped thinking of botany as a lesser subject. Veyra moved between them on the seat, accepting careful overtures of familiarity from both with measured graciousness. They talked about what Hogwarts would be like. Harry listened and contributed and didn't mention the things he already knew, the house system, the teachers, the specific architecture of the wards, because this moment wasn't about what he already knew. It was about these two people who were already, clearly, going to matter. When the train rounded the last bend and the castle appeared against the darkening sky, Harry stood and looked at it through the window for a long moment. It was larger than the pictures in his books. The magic was visible to him through the dragon line, vast layered spellwork that had been building for 1,000 years, the castle essentially alive with accumulated intention. But there was something else underneath it, something that felt like a hand on a scale, a deliberate pressure in the architecture of the wards. "Do you feel that?" Veyra asked. "Yes," Harry said. "Something is suppressed here," she said. "Something old." "We'll look at it," Harry said. "When we're inside." The boats across the lake. Veyra flew above them, full-sized for the first time in Harry's presence in front of strangers. She'd expanded the moment they stepped off the train, because the open sky demanded it, and there was a collective gasp from the first years and a moment of genuine panic from a handful of them until Harry said, clearly and without urgency, "She's with me. She won't hurt anyone." She circled once overhead, silver-white fire briefly visible as she exhaled against the cold night air, and then compressed again and landed on the bow of Harry's boat, which rode noticeably lower in the water as a result. Hermione, in the same boat, said nothing, but the expression on her face was the one Harry was already coming to recognize as her "I am recalibrating everything I thought I knew" face. He liked that face. It meant she was taking things seriously. Neville, also in the boat, held Trevor very tightly and looked at Veyra with wide eyes and said, quietly and apparently sincerely, "You're brilliant." Veyra looked at him. Looked at Harry. The feeling that came through the bond was something like this one stays. The castle up close was overwhelming even to Harry, who had prepared. The entrance hall was a study in deliberate enormity, the kind of architecture designed to make people feel small, which worked on everyone in the group with the exception of Harry and, debatably, Hermione, who was looking at the enchanted ceiling with an expression of pure intellectual delight. Professor McGonagall met them. She was exactly what Harry had expected from everything he'd read, precise, strict in the way of someone who found enforcement of standards preferable to the alternative, but with a fundamental decency underneath it that showed in the way she looked at the first years as people rather than problems. She gave a short speech about houses and then looked at the group assembled before her. Her eyes found Harry immediately. They stayed there a moment longer than the others. Her eyes found Veyra. To her considerable credit, her only reaction was a very slight tightening at the corners of her eyes. "Mr. Potter," she said. "I was informed you had an unusual familiar." "Professor," Harry said. "She will need to remain in the entrance hall during the sorting." "The Great Hall, Veyra will be where I am," Harry said. Pleasantly but absolutely. "She's bonded to me. Separation creates problems." McGonagall looked at him. Harry looked back. Veyra, on his shoulder, regarded the professor with polite patience. McGonagall looked at Veyra for a long moment. Something moved across her face, recognition, maybe, or the dawning of a recognition. "A Shadowfire Drake," she said, very quietly. "Yes," Harry said. She was quiet another moment. "She may attend. She will remain controlled." "She always does," Harry said. "It's everyone else who tends to have the problem." Something flickered at the corner of McGonagall's mouth. She turned back to the group. The Great Hall was every bit as extraordinary as it should have been, the enchanted ceiling showing the real sky outside, which tonight was clear and brilliant with stars, the 4 long house tables bright with candlelight, the hundreds of students turned in their seats to look at the first year's processing in. Harry walked into it and felt the dragon line hum strong and resonant beneath the castle, and the strange pressure he'd felt in the wards was clearer now, closer, something in the fabric of the magic here that didn't quite belong to the honest thousand-year accumulation. Something newer. Deliberate. He looked at the staff table. Found the white beard and half-moon spectacles immediately. Albus Dumbledore was looking at him with an expression of benevolent pleasure, the kind that powerful people wear when things are going according to their expectations. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked away and found his seat in the line of waiting first years, and the sorting began. The Sorting Hat's song was interesting, a piece of magical construct that was genuinely sentient in a way Harry found compelling, its verse containing more actual information about the school's history than most of the books he'd read. When the first names were called and students began filing up to the stool, Harry watched the hat with attention. Granger, Hermione. Hermione sat down. The hat took barely 10 seconds. Gryffindor, it announced. Hermione walked to the Gryffindor table with the composure of someone who expected this result and was glad to have it confirmed. She sat down across from Harry's current position in the line and caught his eye. He nodded. She sat up a little straighter. Longbottom, Neville. Neville went to the stool with the expression of someone approaching something potentially explosive. The hat sat on his head and stayed there for a while, longer than Hermione, the whole hall gradually going quiet with the duration of it. Harry felt, through the dragon line, the shape of Neville's magic pulsing unevenly, that river trying to find its level. Gryffindor, the hat declared, with what seemed to Harry like a note of genuine conviction. Neville looked profoundly relieved. Potter, Harry. The hall went quiet in a different way. Not the contemplative quiet of watching the hat think, but the arrested, attentive quiet of a crowd that's been waiting for a specific thing. Harry walked to the stool and sat down, and the hat dropped over his eyes. "Good evening," said the hat. In his head, clearly, with the specific quality of a mind that had been doing this for 1,000 years and found it endlessly interesting. "Hello," Harry said. "I've been waiting for you," said the hat. Not impatiently. "But you're not what I expected." "I get that a lot." "No, I mean, there is something here." The hat's mind moved through him with the ease of long practice, and then stopped. With the specific quality of something that has just pressed against a wall in the dark and discovered the wall goes somewhere. "You're bonded," the hat said. "Yes. I can see the dragon line. Through you." "I've never," the hat seemed to collect itself. "You're extraordinary. And you already know it, which is either admirable or concerning depending on what you do with it." "What would you do with it?" Harry asked. The hat seemed surprised by the question. After a moment, "I'd try to be worthy of it." "That's what I'm doing," Harry said. The hat was quiet for a long beat. "Then, you could be Slytherin. There's enough there, the strategy, the patience, the willingness to play long games." "I know. But you're not going to be." "I could be in any house," Harry said. "But Hermione and Neville are in Gryffindor, and I don't leave people I've chosen." The hat made a sound that might have been a laugh. 1,000 years old and I can still be surprised. "Gryffindor," it called to the hall. The noise was enormous. Harry removed the hat, handed it back to McGonagall, and walked to the Gryffindor table. Veyra, who had spent the sorting sitting very quietly on his shoulder and had not moved and had not caused any panic at all, which Harry privately thought deserved recognition, spread her wings briefly as they sat, a small, unconscious declaration of presence. The hall's noise immediately shifted. Not to fear exactly, but to that particular kind of attention that large, dangerous things attract when they're not behaving dangerously. Eyes from every table. Eyes from the staff table. Dumbledore's eyes, which had been warm and pleased when Harry walked in and were now something more carefully calibrated. Harry reached for a bread roll and broke it in half. Hermione leaned over. "That went well." "The hat tried to put me in Slytherin," Harry said. Hermione blinked. "Why didn't it?" "I told it Gryffindor." She stared at him. "You told the hat?" It was listening, Harry said. It takes the preferences into account. I didn't know you could do that. I read about it. He handed her half the bread roll. There's a lot the books don't advertise. Dumbledore rose to give the start-of-term speech. Harry listened. The speech was everything he expected, warm, gently authoritative, full of the specific kind of wisdom that worked best when it went unchallenged. Dumbledore was very good at this. Harry noticed exactly how good he was and filed it away. Welcome, Dumbledore said, and his voice carried through the hall effortlessly, to another year. I see many new faces. His eyes swept the first years and settled for a warm moment on Harry, and we are all very glad indeed that you found your way here. He smiled. Harry met his eyes. Dumbledore's smile was genuine. That was the thing about Dumbledore, the thing Harry had understood from Myra's testimony. He wasn't pretending. He actually liked Harry, in the way that someone likes a piece they've moved well on a board they care about. The warmth was real. The liking was real. And neither of those things changed what he'd done. Harry smiled back. Pleasantly. Completely. Dumbledore's smile flickered, barely perceptible, less than a second, but Harry saw it. Something uncertain moved across the old man's face, some recalculation. He looked away smoothly and continued his speech. He's trying to read you, Veyra said. I know. And he can't, Harry said. Because what he's looking for is the boy he put in that cupboard. And that boy isn't here. Veyra's ember burned warm and satisfied in the bond. The feast that followed was extraordinary, not just the food, which was excellent in the way of things produced by magic applied to the specific task of excellent food, but the company. The Gryffindor table opened around Harry with the cautious friendliness of a group that wasn't sure yet what to make of him. The Weasley twins, who were 2 years ahead, materialized beside him at some point during the main course and introduced themselves as Fred and George in a way that made it clear the names were more or less interchangeable. You're the one with the dragon, one of them said. She's right here, Harry said, gesturing to Veyra, who was eating a piece of chicken with the focused pleasure of someone who had been compressed into a pocket for several hours and was making up for it. Can she breathe fire? Frequently, Harry said. Brilliant, said both twins simultaneously, in the tone of people who have just been given information of immediate practical value. Ron Weasley, who was in Harry's year and who had the look of someone who knew the twins well enough to be perpetually braced for whatever they did next, leaned across the table. Does she do it on command? She does what she wants, Harry said. But sometimes what she wants and what I want are the same thing. Veyra, as if on cue, exhaled a small silver-white flame that briefly illuminated the bread basket and smelled like electricity and warm stone. Several nearby first-years jumped. Ron stared at her with open delight. Wicked, he said, which was the word, Harry was learning, that Ron Weasley applied to all things he found genuinely impressive. The feast ended and the first years were led to Gryffindor Tower. Harry walked with Hermione and Neville and took note of the castle's geography with the focused interest of someone who intends to know this building thoroughly. At the portrait of the fat lady, the password was given and the hole swung open, and the common room beyond it was warm and red and full of the easy noise of a shared space used by people who had come back to something familiar. Harry stood in it for a moment. He'd never had a space like this. The concept of a shared, communal warmth, of a room that belonged to a group that you belonged to by right, was new enough that he noticed it. It's nice, Neville said quietly beside him, with the particular kind of awe of someone who has something they weren't sure they'd get. Yes, Harry agreed. He was sitting by the fire an hour later, after the dormitory arrangements had been sorted and most of the first years had gone to bed, when Percy Weasley, the prefect, 5th year, earnest in a way that was almost aggressive, came to tell him that Dumbledore had requested a brief meeting before bed. Tonight? Harry said. The headmaster thought, I'll see him tomorrow morning, Harry said pleasantly. I'm busy this evening. Percy blinked. He was clearly not accustomed to first years declining headmaster requests. He said, "Tomorrow morning," Harry said. "Tell him I'm looking forward to it." Percy retreated, visibly unsure what to do with this, and Harry turned back to the fire. Hermione, across from him, looked up from her book. "Was that a good idea?" she said. "It was a true thing," Harry said. "I'm busy this evening." "What are you doing this evening?" Harry looked at Veyra, who had climbed off his shoulder and settled on the arm of the chair and was watching the fire with orange eyes that reflected the flames in doubled mirrors. "Thinking," he said. He was thinking about the pressure in the wards. The suppressed thing he'd felt when he arrived, the sense of something old and connected being deliberately blocked from him through the castle's own magical architecture. He was thinking about what Mira had told him 3 years ago, about someone who had placed him deliberately, who had designed his suffering. He was thinking about Dumbledore's flickering smile and the specific quality of the old man's look when Harry had met his eyes, the look of someone who had been managing something and had just noticed the something might have opinions. He was thinking about the dragon conclave, whose awareness he could feel at the edges of the dragon line, 5 ancient presences, patient and watching. "They're paying attention," Veyra said. "I know. Grathan has been circling the Scottish Highlands since September began," she said. "He's waiting." "What for?" "For what you find inside these walls," she said. "Whatever is being suppressed, they want to know what it is. They can feel the edges of it from outside. But you're inside now." Harry looked at the fire. Then at Veyra. "Give me time," he said. "I'll find it." She made the thunder purr sound and settled her chin on his knee, and outside the windows of Gryffindor Tower the Scottish night was cold and clear, and somewhere in the dark of the Highlands a Norwegian ridgeback named Grathan was making slow circles in the dark sky, waiting with the patience of something very old and very certain that what it was waiting for would come. It would. Harry Potter had arrived at Hogwarts. Things were about to start moving. Chapter 3, The Weight of Old Magic. The meeting with Dumbledore happened at 8 in the morning, because Harry had said tomorrow morning and he meant it. He knocked on the gargoyle at the base of the headmaster's tower, gave the password that McGonagall had passed along, Sherbet Lemon, which Harry found telling in its studied whimsy, and rode the rotating staircase up with Veyra on his shoulder and his hands in his pockets. The office was extraordinary. Harry took it in the way he took in all new environments, quickly, thoroughly, filing details without lingering on any single one. The portraits of previous headmasters, most of them awake and watching with unconcealed interest. The various instruments on the side tables, silver and delicate, spinning and clicking with a purposefulness that suggested they were measuring something specific. Fawkes the Phoenix on his perch, who looked at Harry and then at Veyra with the deep, patient eyes of a creature that had been watching things unfold for a very long time. Veyra and Fawkes regarded each other. Something passed between them that Harry felt at the edges of the bond, a recognition, ancient and mutual, the kind that happened between old things that understood each other's nature without needing explanation. Dumbledore was behind his desk. He rose when Harry came in, which was, Harry understood, a deliberate choice. The headmaster rising for a first-year student was a statement about the kind of conversation this was going to be. "Harry," he said, warmly. "Please, sit down." "Good morning, Professor," Harry said. He sat. Veyra's claws settled on his shoulder with the easy permanence of a fixture. Dumbledore sat back down and looked at him over his half-moon spectacles with eyes that were very blue and very sharp beneath the twinkling. The twinkling was real, Harry had decided. It wasn't performance. Dumbledore genuinely found most things delightful. That was part of what made him so good at what he did. "I must say," Dumbledore began, and his voice was the warm, slightly wondering tone of someone experiencing pleasant surprise, "you are not quite what I imagined." "No?" Harry said. "The last 10 years must have been very formative," Dumbledore said. The word was chosen carefully, Harry noted. Formative. Not difficult. Not lonely. Not the words you'd use if you knew what the last 10 years had actually been. They were, Harry agreed. "I should have visited you sooner," Dumbledore said, and there was something in it, not quite guilt, which would have required him to believe he'd done something wrong, but a kind of adjustment, a tactical acknowledgement. It was remiss of me. Harry looked at him steadily. You knew where I was the entire time. Of course, Dumbledore said. The blood wards required suffering to function, Harry said. Not just blood. Suffering. The sacrifice protections Lily Potter left are amplified by the emotional conditions of the protected person's environment. He kept his voice conversational. I've read about the mechanics. They're quite old magic. Interesting that those specific wards were chosen. Something shifted behind Dumbledore's eyes. Very small. Very controlled. You've been studying. Since I was 7, Harry said. I had time. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. He was clearly recalibrating, and doing it with the smooth competence of someone who recalibrated often and had gotten very good at it. Veyra, he said, looking at her. A Shadowfire Drake. I must confess, when Minerva's report reached me, I was astonished. The species has been thought extinct for 3 centuries, Harry said. She found me when I was 5. Or you found each other, Dumbledore said gently. He leaned forward slightly. Harry, I want you to know that you can come to me with anything. Whatever you need, whatever questions you have about your past, your parents, your destiny, I know about the prophecy, Harry said. The silence that followed was of a different quality than the previous silences. Fawkes shifted on his perch. 2 of the portraits murmured to each other. Dumbledore's expression remained composed, but something underneath it had moved, the way the ground moves before anyone on the surface notices the earthquake. How did he stopped? Started again. That information is highly restricted. Yes, Harry agreed. It is. He didn't explain further. He held Dumbledore's gaze with the ease of someone who has spent years in the company of creatures that measure you in the first 3 seconds and either respect you or don't, and who has learned that the most powerful thing you can do with a secret is demonstrate that you have it without revealing its source. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. Whatever he was looking for, the frightened boy who needed guidance, the malleable student who would accept a narrative, he was clearly not finding it. You are very remarkable, Dumbledore said finally. And for a moment, underneath all the layers of strategy and management, it seemed genuine. Just a man, looking at a boy who had become something other than what he'd planned for, and finding the something other genuinely impressive. Thank you, Harry said. He stood. I should get to breakfast. First day. Of course, Dumbledore said. He rose again as Harry moved to the door. Harry. His voice was gentle. I hope we can trust each other. Harry paused at the door and looked back. I think that depends on what we each do next, he said. Don't you? He left Dumbledore standing behind his desk with an expression that, for perhaps the first time, Harry had no easy name for. The first week at Hogwarts was a process of rapid orientation. Harry moved through it with the ease of someone who had been preparing for this specific environment for years. The castle's geography resolved itself quickly in his mental map, the class schedule presented no logistical challenges, and the social landscape, which was the thing most first-years found most overwhelming, was simply interesting rather than stressful. Transfiguration first, with McGonagall, who turned her desk into a pig and back with the economical precision of someone demonstrating mastery rather than showing off. Harry watched the magic work, felt it through the dragon line, the particular quality of structured intention meeting physical reality, and when they were asked to attempt turning a match into a needle, he did it on the second try. Not the first, because his connection to the bond sometimes made fine motor wand precision take a moment to calibrate, but the second, cleanly, the match going silver and sharp with a quality that made McGonagall stop and look at it with an expression she quickly controlled. Hermione did it on the first try. Harry started applauding, which made her go pink and made several of the other students look surprised, as though applauding a classmate's success was eccentric. Nice work, Harry told her. Yours was better quality, she said. Mine was needle-shaped, but yours actually has the tensile strength of steel. I noticed that too, Harry said. How? He thought about how to explain the dragon line and the way it interfaced with wand magic and the specific way the bond amplified his sense of magical quality, and decided this was a longer conversation than the gap between transfiguration and charms allowed. Later, he said. It's a long answer. Charms with Flitwick was a delight. The tiny professor clearly loved his subject with the deep enthusiasm of someone who had never stopped finding it wonderful, and Harry had liked him immediately. The Wingardium Leviosa lesson was straightforward: wrist movement, long way up, short way down, Hermione's pronunciation crisp and exact and effective. Ron Weasley's feather hit him in the back of the head. Not Hermione's. Potions with Snape was a different kind of experience entirely. Harry had thought about Snape. He knew the history, the boyhood friendship with his mother, the falling out, the Death Eater years, the turn and the spy work and the debt owed. He knew that Snape's feelings about James Potter were uncomplicated only in the sense that they were uncomplicated in a sledgehammer way. He had prepared himself for hostility. What he hadn't fully prepared for was the specific theatrical quality of Snape's hostility, the way the man swept into the dungeon classroom with his robes moving like wings, the way he spoke about the art of potion-making with a genuine, buried passion that surfaced despite itself, the way his eyes found Harry in the front row and something moved in them that was too complicated to be just dislike. Potter, Snape said, in the voice of someone who has been waiting years to say a name in exactly this tone. Our new celebrity. Harry looked at him. Professor. Snape proceeded to ask him a series of rapid-fire questions about potion ingredients and properties, questions designed, Harry understood immediately, to be unanswerable by a prepared but not extraordinary student, a trap set to publicly demonstrate inadequacy. What would I get, Snape said, if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? The draught of living death, Harry said. It's the most powerful sleeping draught known. The combination works because asphodel from the Amaryllis family reacts with wormwood soporific alkaloids to produce a compound that suppresses higher brain function while keeping the autonomic nervous system active. There's a variation that uses valerian root as a substitute for wormwood in warmer climates, the Beauxbatons version, but it's less stable. A silence. Snape's eyes had done something Harry hadn't expected, not narrowed in irritation but sharpened in involuntary interest. Where would you find a bezoar? Snape said. Stomach of a goat. Works as a general antidote because the calcium carbonate in the stone chelates most common poisons before they reach the bloodstream. Less effective against magical poisons that bypass the digestive system entirely. He paused. Though there's an argument that a bezoar solution is more effective than the stone directly for fast-acting poisons. Slughorn apparently published on it in 1967. Another silence. Longer this time. What is the difference, Snape said quietly, between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, Harry said. Aconitum. Different common names depending on regional tradition. The Scottish tradition calls it wolfsbane, the English tradition monkshood, and several continental traditions use aconite. All refer to Aconitum napellus specifically, though there are 60+ species in the genus and several have distinct magical applications that are sometimes incorrectly conflated. Snape looked at him for a long moment. The classroom had gone very still. Veyra, who had been sitting inside Harry's bag, the bag had a space-expanded interior, one of the first charms Harry had applied to it, had pushed the top flap open with her nose and was watching Snape with calm ember eyes. Snape's gaze went to her. Stayed there. Something moved across his face that wasn't any of the things Harry had expected. He looked from Veyra to Harry and back, and whatever he was thinking, he kept it efficiently behind his face. 10 points to Gryffindor, he said, with the specific reluctance of someone paying a debt they resent. And close that bag. Harry closed the bag. Thank you, Professor. Snape looked at him for one more beat, then turned to the class and began the actual lesson with the focused energy of someone putting something aside for later. He was cutting in his comments to other students. Neville in particular bore the brunt of it in a way that made Harry's jaw tighten, but he didn't circle back to Harry. After class, in the corridor, Neville was quiet in the specific way of someone trying to compress themselves. "He's wrong about you," Harry said, walking beside him. Neville looked up. "He's head of Slytherin. He's been teaching for years." He's wrong," Harry said. "Some people are invested in you being less than you are. That's about them, not about you." He looked at Neville. "I felt your magic in potions. When you were nervous it contracted, went uneven. When you were working on the chopping, before Snape said anything, it was steady." Neville looked at him. "You keep saying you feel people's magic." "Through the bond," Harry said. "It connects me to the dragon line. Old magical network, predates wands. Dragons run on it. I can sense the quality and shape of magic around me." He paused. "Yours is large. You're not small, Neville. You've just been told you are, and you haven't had anyone tell you different." Neville walked beside him for a moment without speaking. Then, "How do you know so much?" "Dragons taught me," Harry said simply. Neville absorbed this with the quiet pragmatism of someone who has decided that Harry Potter exists outside his normal categories and has simply chosen to update his categories. "Okay," he said. "Does that mean Veyra knows potions theory?" "I know considerably more potions theory than your professor," Veyra said, in Harry's head. "She says yes," Harry said. Hermione appeared from the direction of the library, which she had evidently visited in the 40 minutes between potions and lunch with characteristic efficiency. "I found 3 references to Shadowfire Drake bonds," she said, falling into step beside them and not bothering with preamble, which Harry was coming to appreciate. "2 of them say the species is extinct. 1, a book from 1340, hand-copied, I had to ask Professor Bin's actual ghost to retrieve it from the restricted archive, says the bond changes the bonded human's relationship to foundational magic. Specifically that it, she consulted her notes, opens the substrate, which I think means the dragon line you mentioned." "Yes," Harry said. "That's accurate. And it says the human becomes visible to all dragonkind through the network. Which means, every dragon knows I exist," Harry said. "Yes." Hermione closed her notebook and looked at him. "And they're watching. Some of them are here," Harry said. She stared at him. "Here. In Scotland. Grathan, Norwegian Ridgeback, patriarch of his line, has been circling the Highlands since September started. Mira, a Welsh green seer, is further south but within range. There are others." Hermione processed this. "Because of you. Because something here bothers them," Harry said. "And because whatever it is, it involves me." She was quiet for 3 paces. "What is it?" "I'm still finding out," Harry said. They found a table in the Great Hall and Harry ate lunch and thought about the pressure in the wards that had been there since he arrived. He'd felt it more clearly in Snape's dungeon. The dungeons ran deepest into the castle's magical substrate, and down there the pressure was like a physical weight. Something was suppressed in the foundations of the school's magic. Something connected to him. He went to the library that evening instead of the common room. Madame Pants watched him with the expression of someone who respects serious library use and is reserving judgment on the person doing it. Harry went straight to the magical theory section, which was not where most first-years went, and pulled 5 books on ward construction and 3 on foundational castle magic and 1 very old volume on dragonline theory that had been miscatalogued under divination. He was 3 books in when Hermione arrived. She sat down across from him without being invited, which was the right move. She looked at the stack of books. "What are you looking for?" "Something in the castle wards is being suppressed," Harry said. "I've felt it since we arrived. It's connected to the dragon line, or connected to my access to it. Something is blocking a connection that should be open. Blocking your magic? Not my magic exactly. My perception through the bond. Like, imagine you can normally see colors, and suddenly there's a specific color you can almost see but can't quite. It's there, but there's something between you and it. Hermione pulled two of his books toward her and opened the first one. What does it feel like? The suppression? Like spell work, Harry said. But old. And careful. Layered into the ward structure so it reads as part of the normal castle magic unless you know what you're looking for. She read for a moment. If someone wanted to suppress a specific person's access to an external magical network, she said slowly, and they wanted to hide it in existing ward architecture, they'd have to know the ward structure intimately. Headmaster level, probably. Yes, Harry said. She looked up. Dumbledore. I don't have proof, Harry said. I have a strong suspicion and a sensation. He paused. But Mira, one of the elder dragons, told me 3 years ago that someone had been deliberately shaping my situation. The Dursleys weren't an accident of circumstance. They were chosen. Hermione was quiet for a moment. Not shocked exactly, she was too precise a thinker to react before she'd processed, but working through it, her eyes moving slightly as she traced implications. If that's true, she said carefully, then the suppression in the wards is what? An extension of the same plan? Keeping you from accessing your full connection to the dragon line? Keeping me from knowing what I'm connected to, Harry said. What I actually am. If you were managing someone, using them for a specific purpose, you'd want them to feel more dependent on you than they were. Less certain of their own resources. Hermione put the book down. Harry, she said, with the directness that was one of her best qualities, what are you going to do about it? He considered this. Right now? Learn everything I can. Understand exactly what's there before I move anything. He met her eyes. If you start pulling threads before you know what they're holding, things fall apart in the wrong order. She nodded slowly. And when you know? Then I fix it, he said. All of it. She held his gaze for a moment, and something settled in her expression, a decision made. Okay, she said. Then let's find it. They worked until 11, when Madame Pants began ostentatiously shelving books in their vicinity. Harry had found 3 references to ward-embedded suppression charms by then, and Hermione had found the theoretical framework for how they'd interact with a dragonline connection specifically. It was sophisticated work. Intentional work. He walked back to Gryffindor Tower with the shape of it clearer in his mind, and the ember in his chest, Veyra's part of him, burning very steady and very low. The conclave should know, Veyra said. They already suspect, Harry said. I'll send word to Mira when I have something concrete. Grathan is not patient. Grathan has been alive for 400 years, Harry said. He can wait a week. He could, Veyra allowed. He chooses not to is a different matter. Defense against the dark arts with Professor Quirrell was strange in a way Harry had no framework for yet. The man was nervous, genuinely, structurally nervous, in a way that went deeper than personality. His magic felt wrong through the dragon line, and not in the way of someone inexperienced or frightened. It felt doubled. Layered in a way that didn't fit a single person. Harry sat in the front row and watched Quirrell stutter through an explanation of dark creatures with the focused attention of someone cataloging a problem. Veyra, inside his bag, was completely still. Not the stillness of boredom. The stillness of attention. There are 2 of them, she said. Harry kept his face completely neutral. What? 2 magical presences in that body, she said. One on top. One beneath. The one beneath is old. Cold. Not dead but not entirely alive either. Like something preserved. Harry looked at Quirrell's turban. At the way the man never turned his back on the class. Voldemort, he said. What is left of him, she said. A piece. Parasitic. Feeding. Harry leaned back in his chair and continued to take notes on the red cap with the same attentive expression he'd been wearing, and inside the steady burning of the bond he was very, very still. He found Hermione after class, walking fast toward the library. "Quirrell," he said, falling into step beside her. "I know," she said. He glanced at her. "What do you know?" "I don't know what you know," she said. But his defense theory is completely inconsistent with itself, like someone constructed a surface-level understanding without deep comprehension. And there's something, I can't explain it but there's something, wrong with him. "There's two of him," Harry said. "Veyra can tell through the bond. Something is attached to him. Living on him." He kept his voice low. "Voldemort. Or what's left of him." Hermione stopped walking. Then, visibly, she made herself start again. "Here. In the castle." "In a teacher," Harry said. She was quiet for the length of a corridor. "The Philosopher's Stone," she said. "It was moved from Gringotts this summer. There was an article. And there are security measures on the 3rd floor, that Dumbledore told us about in the opening speech," Harry said. He pointed a first-year population directly at the one thing he wanted protected. Hermione looked at him. "You think that was deliberate?" "I think a man who has been deliberately engineering someone's development for years is not someone who makes accidental announcements." He paused. "I think we were meant to find the stone. Or I was." She processed this for 3 steps. "Another test." "Everything is a test," Harry said. "When someone is building a weapon, every situation is a sharpening stone." Hermione's jaw tightened. It was the particular tightening of someone who understands a principle intellectually but finds the application of it to a real person they know morally intolerable. "That's vile." "Yes," Harry said. "It is." Neville was waiting for them in the common room, because Harry had asked him to be, which was something Harry had started doing deliberately, including Neville, which Neville responded to with a focused, earnest engagement that confirmed what Harry already knew about the size of him. He'd asked Neville to look into protective plant magic for a specific reason. "I found something," Neville said, before they'd even sat down. He had a book open on the table, a specialist herbology text that had clearly been in the restricted section by the condition of its cover. "Devil's Snare specifically. There's a modification where it responds to dragonfire heat signatures, it's in here, a variant used in old Gringotts security systems. It identifies bond-marked individuals as hostile." "Why would you need that?" Hermione said. "I don't yet," Harry said. "But I wanted to know what was in our way before I needed to know." He looked at Neville. "Good research." Neville sat up slightly. "McGonagall signed my restricted access request without asking any questions," he said. "I thought she'd refuse." "She probably noticed your magic in transfiguration," Harry said. "She's been paying attention to you." Neville looked startled, then thoughtful in the way of someone adjusting a model. Harry looked at the fire. Outside the common room windows the Scottish night had come on, and somewhere in the dark beyond the castle walls, the dragon line hummed with 5 old presences and the particular quality of attention that precedes significant action. The suppression in the wards was still there. The doubled presence in Quirrell was still there. The stone was presumably still on the 3rd floor. Dumbledore was presumably still in his office, managing things. There was a great deal to do, and Harry understood with perfect clarity that the order of operations mattered enormously. Pull the wrong thread first and things fell apart in the wrong way. So, the wards first. Because everything else depended on him having full access to what he was. He picked up his wand from the table. Turned it over in his hands. Felt the Shadowfire scale warm in the handle against his palm. "I need to find where in the castle the suppression anchor is," he said. "The spell maintaining the suppression will have a physical anchor point, a runic inscription somewhere in the castle's foundations, most likely. Something old enough to be read as part of the original structure. The dungeons go deepest, Hermione said immediately. And the suppression is strongest down there, Harry said. Yes. When? Neville said. Harry looked at both of them. Tonight's too soon. Friday. Filch's patrol route has a gap in the basement corridor from 2 to 4 in the morning, I asked nearly headless Nick. He paused. And don't ask how I got Nick talking. It involved a very sad story about a beheading. Hermione pressed her lips together very firmly. Are we? Neville started. Stopped. Tried again. Are we doing things that are probably going to be against the rules? Almost certainly, Harry said. Neville thought about this. Okay, he said. Harry looked at him. You don't have to, I know, Neville said. That's why it's okay. The days between the conversation and Friday were dense with the ordinary texture of first-year life, classes and meals and the social landscape of Gryffindor Tower sorting itself out. Harry played Quidditch with Ron on a borrowed school broom in the evenings, not because anyone had suggested he should, but because the sky was large and clear and Veyra flew beside him and the wind and the height felt like the woods behind Privet Drive, like 6-year-old Harry and the first time she launched, and the feeling still hadn't gotten old. He was coming back from one of those evening flights, robes cold and cheeks flushed, broom over his shoulder, Veyra spiraling down from above to land on the broom handle, when he nearly walked into Draco Malfoy. Draco was coming out of the Quidditch storage shed. He had a broom that was not a school broom. His eyes went to Veyra with the specific quality of attention that people used for things they wanted but hadn't decided yet if they were allowed to want. Potter, he said. Malfoy, Harry said. An awkward pause, which Harry had no particular interest in filling. He waited. She flies with you, Draco said, nodding at Veyra. Always. My father says dragons bond to the weak because they need the protection. He said it with the flat delivery of someone reciting a lesson, and the very flat delivery told Harry it was a lesson he was not entirely sure he believed. Your father is wrong, Harry said, without heat. Dragons bond to the worthy. It's not a protection arrangement. It's a recognition. He held Draco's gaze. If it were about protection, Veyra would have bonded to an Auror or a trained battle mage, not a 5-year-old in Surrey. Draco was quiet for a moment. Something worked in his face, the calculation of someone weighing a position they've held against a counterargument they find hard to dismiss. She recognized you, Draco said. We recognized each other, Harry said. That's how it works. Draco looked at Veyra. She looked back. Her eyes were ember-steady and absolutely unbothered by the Malfoy name. You know about the stone, Draco said abruptly. On the 3rd floor. Everyone knows there's something up there. I know there's something there, Harry said. My father knows too, Draco said. He knows what it is and who it's for. He stopped. His jaw worked slightly. I'm not my father. Harry studied him for a moment. The dragon line didn't lie, it read the shape of magic and the quality of intention, not words, and what Harry read in Draco was something complicated and not entirely resolute but not dishonest. A person trying to work out which parts of their inheritance to keep. No, Harry said. You're not. Draco looked at him for another moment, then turned and walked back toward the castle without another word. His posture was, if anything, straighter than usual. Veyra watched him go. Interesting, she said. Very, Harry agreed. Friday came. 2 in the morning found Harry, Hermione, and Neville at the entrance to the dungeons, Harry's wand lit with a soft silver-white light that wasn't the usual Lumos color and that he'd learned to produce by running the warmth of the bond through the spell. The dungeon corridor was cold and very quiet. Their footsteps were careful and almost silent, Harry's naturally, Hermione's by practiced intention, Neville's with the focused concentration of someone taking this seriously. Veyra moved ahead of them in the dark, her black scales absorbing Harry's wand light so that she was visible only as 2 ember points and the occasional flash of her tail. The suppression was stronger down here. Harry could feel it like pressure in his sinuses. He moved toward it the way you move toward a sound you were trying to locate, not in a straight line but in a slow spiral, attending to the sensation, following its source. He found it in the oldest part of the dungeons, a section that predated the current castle structure by what felt like centuries, where the stones were a different kind of old and the mortar between them had long since become indistinguishable from stone. On the floor, partially covered by a flagstone that had been reset at some point, was a runic inscription. Not old. The style was old, the runes themselves were ancient Futhark adapted for magical anchoring, but the inscription was not weathered the way everything else down here was weathered. Someone had placed this in living memory. Harry crouched beside it. Hermione was on her knees immediately, a small notebook out, copying the inscription with the focused speed of someone who knows the importance of primary documentation. "That's a containment anchor," she said quietly. "The outer ring is standard wardlock runes. But the center configuration," she looked up at Harry. "It's keyed to a specific magical signature." "Mine," Harry said. "How can you tell?" "Because when I get close to it the suppression is almost physical." He held his wand over it without touching. The silver-white light moved strangely at the edge of the inscription, bending inward like light near a drain. "It's feeding on my proximity to it to reinforce itself." "Brilliant and horrible," Hermione said. "There's a counter-inscription," Neville said. He was standing a little back from them, looking at the wall behind them, and when they turned they saw he was right. On the wall, almost invisible in the mortar pattern, was a secondary sequence of runes. "It keeps the main anchor stable. If you disrupted the main inscription but not this one, the anchor would reform." Harry and Hermione looked at each other. "He knows his herbology," Harry said. "He does more than that," Hermione said. Neville looked at the wall with the expression of someone who has been told repeatedly that he doesn't see things correctly and is discovering this was a lie. "What do we do?" Harry stood. He looked at the inscription. Felt the suppression pressing against the bond, against the dragon-line connection that should be fully open and wasn't. Felt, at the edges of that connection, the shape of what it would be when this was gone, larger, cleaner, the full resonance of something that had been partially blocked since he arrived. He thought about doing this carefully. Thought about taking his time, researching the optimal counter-inscription, bringing it back on another night. "Harry," Veyra said. "I know," he said. "It's time." He pressed his palm flat against the runic inscription on the floor. He didn't need a counter-curse. The bond was the counter-curse. The dragon line was older than this magic, older than whoever had written these runes, older than Hogwarts itself, and when Harry opened that connection, both doors, fully, the way they'd opened in the hollow when he was 5, the inscription didn't resist. It simply ceased. The anchor on the wall went out like a snuffed flame. The suppression lifted. What replaced it was like the difference between hearing through a wall and hearing directly, the same signal, but suddenly full and clear and complete. The dragon line opened to him in its entirety and it was vast beyond what he'd felt through the partial connection, a network of ancient magic running through the bones of the world, and in it he could feel not 5 presences but dozens, scores, a whole dragon-kind awareness that had been watching him through a keyhole and was now watching him through an open door. He stood up. His hands were shaking slightly, not from weakness but from the adjustment of a larger current through the same wiring. Hermione was staring at him. The silver-white light from his wand had quadrupled in intensity without him doing anything deliberate to it, and his eyes, he knew, had taken on the quality they took on when the bond was fully active. The color hadn't changed but the quality had, the specific quality that made adults use words like unervingly composed. "Is it done?" Neville said, very quietly. "Yes," Harry said. "Are you all right?" Harry thought about this. He thought about what it felt like to have something restored to you that you hadn't known had been taken, to feel the full shape of yourself for the first time. He thought about the person who had put this inscription here, who had done it to a child in a cupboard, who had done it while writing warm welcoming letters about how glad he was Harry had found his way here. "I'm better than all right," he said. His wand light had settled back to normal by the time they made it back to Gryffindor Tower. They walked through the sleeping castle in single file and silence, and the dragon line moved under Harry's feet through the stone of the castle like a pulse, enormous and constant, and in it he felt Grathan in the Highlands shift direction. Move closer. The elder dragons knew. The anchor was gone. The suppression was lifted. The thing that had been done was now fully visible from where they stood, with all their years and their patient, unforgiving attention. Harry climbed through the portrait hole into the warm red of the common room and sat down in his chair by the fire, and Veyra climbed from his shoulder to the arm of the chair and settled there, and the bond hummed between them with a completeness it hadn't had before tonight. In the dragon line, very faint, very far away, and in the direction of Wales, he felt something warm and old. Myra's presence. And the feeling that came through from her was not words but was as clear as any word had ever been. "Now," it said. "Now we begin." Harry looked at the fire. "Yes," he said quietly. "We do." Chapter 4, Fire and Testimony. Myra arrived on a Tuesday. Harry felt her coming through the dragon line an hour before she crossed the castle's outer wards, a slow, inevitable approach, like watching a weather system move in from the west. He was in charms when it happened, Flitwick demonstrating a color change charm on a set of ceramic tiles, and the warmth that moved through the bond was nothing like urgency. It was announcement. The difference between someone knocking and someone simply opening a door they have always had the right to open. He waited until the end of class. Then he went to find McGonagall. She was in her office between classes, grading papers with the focused efficiency of someone who considered wasted time a personal affront. She looked up when he knocked and came in, and whatever she read in his expression made her set the quill down immediately. "Something is coming," Harry said. "I felt the ward disturbance 6 minutes ago," McGonagall said. "I've been waiting for you to come explain it." She folded her hands on the desk. "What is coming, Mr. Potter?" "A Welsh green elder," Harry said. "Her name is Myra. She's a seer, dragonkind's version of one, which is somewhat different from the wizarding tradition. She won't harm anyone." McGonagall was quiet for a moment. "The castle wards treat any dragon above a certain size as a hostile entity." "She knows that," Harry said. "She's walking through them anyway." A pause. McGonagall looked at him with the expression she occasionally deployed when Harry said something that she needed a moment to fully process. "Walking through them." "She's very old," Harry said. "The castle wards are younger than she is. They're not precisely a deterrent for her." McGonagall stood. She moved with the efficiency of someone who has made a decision and considers deliberation a separate stage from execution. "Then we should meet her at the grounds. Before she reaches the castle proper and causes a general panic." Harry looked at her. "You're coming?" "She is a guest," McGonagall said, in the tone of someone for whom hospitality was a moral commitment regardless of the inconvenience. "Even an uninvited one. Now come." They crossed the grounds in the thin October morning, frost crunching underfoot, the castle's shadow long behind them. Hermione had seen them moving from the charms corridor window and had caught up by the time they reached the bottom of the stone steps. She'd simply fallen into step beside Harry without asking, and he let her because she'd earned that. Myra was at the edge of the forbidden forest. She was larger than Harry remembered. Not enormously larger, she'd grown since he was 10, which made sense. Elder dragons added mass slowly but consistently over centuries, but the size was not the first thing you noticed about her. The first thing you noticed was the stillness. She stood at the tree line and the forest around her was completely, absolutely quiet, not the quiet of emptiness but the quiet of everything in it having recognized what she was and made appropriate decisions about movement. Her scales were Welsh green, a deep, muted green-gray that changed with the light, dark as slate in the shadows, almost emerald where the morning caught her. Her eyes were gold. Not amber, not yellow, the specific, saturated gold of old coins, of things made to outlast the people who made them. McGonagall stopped a sensible distance away and said, with admirable composure, "Good morning." Mira lowered her great head. Not in submission. In acknowledgement, the distinction being very important. "Minerva McGonagall," she said. Her voice, when it reached through the dragon line to Harry, was the music through stone he remembered from childhood, slow, resonant, each word carrying the weight of something that had considered language very carefully for a very long time. When it came as sound to the others, he wasn't sure what they heard. Probably something that didn't quite resolve into language but carried the impression of it. "She's acknowledging you," Harry told McGonagall. McGonagall inclined her head in return, with the dignity of someone deciding that if a dragon was going to extend courtesy then courtesy would be returned in full. "She is welcome on these grounds," she said, and looked at Harry, who translated. Myra's gold eyes moved to Harry. They stayed there. The warmth in the bond shifted to something that was not exactly joy but was its older, quieter relative, the feeling of a long care made manifest, of watching from a distance and finally not watching from a distance. "Harry Potter," she said. "You have grown." "So have you," Harry said. The sound she made was not quite the thunder purr Veyra made but was related to it, a deep resonance that moved through the ground and vibrated in the chest cavity. McGonagall held her position with heroic composure. Hermione, beside Harry, said very quietly, "She's magnificent." "Your companion has a clear mind," Mira said. "I can feel it from here." "She wants to know everything," Harry said to Hermione. "She's saying it as a compliment." Hermione absorbed this and stood slightly straighter. Mira moved. The movement was slow and deliberate, each massive footfall placed with care, her body's bulk held with a precision that minimized disruption. She could move without devastating her surroundings, Harry knew, though the ground still shook slightly with each step. She walked past the edge of the forbidden forest and onto the open grounds and stopped 20 feet from Harry. Then she sat. The way a cat sits, which was an astonishing thing to watch in a creature this size, all controlled power becoming deliberate stillness. "I need to show you something," she said. "And you need to let me." Harry looked at her. "What kind of showing?" "The kind that uses the bond," she said. "I have been watching you since before you could walk. I know the shape of your history through the dragon line. What was done in the years before you came here, the choices that were made for you, I can show you directly. Not describe. Show." Harry was quiet for a moment. He understood what she was saying. The dragon line carried not just presence but memory, the impressions left by magical events were carried in it the way currents carry sediment, and a seer like Mira could read those impressions with a clarity that went well beyond what observation alone provided. She was offering to show him his own history from the outside. The things that had been arranged. The decisions made about him before he could speak. "All right," he said. McGonagall took a small step forward. "Mr. Potter, it's all right," Harry said. He looked at her. "I want to know." He walked up to Mira and placed his hand on her foreleg, the scale warm and massive under his palm, and opened the bond the way he'd learned to open it in the dungeon 4 days ago, fully, both doors, nothing held back. The world went white and then it went backward. He saw Godric's Hollow first. Not as it was now, he'd read the descriptions, the ruined cottage, the memorial, but as it had been on the night of October 31st, 1981. He felt the shape of his mother's magic in the air, enormous and specific and aching with a quality he had no word for because he had never had a mother and the word for the quality was hers. He felt the killing curse land. Felt the protection activate, not like a shield but like a gift, the most deliberate act of magic he had ever encountered, magic made of the specific love that sacrifices itself completely. Then he felt the aftermath. Dumbledore arriving. He hadn't come immediately. Harry felt the timeline in the Dragonline's impression of that night, felt the gap between the event and the arrival, felt the choices made in that gap. Dumbledore had come after he'd arranged things. After Hagrid had been sent. After the decision had already been made about where the boy would go. He saw the Dursleys' house. Felt his own infant magic in the Dragonline's record, small, present, recognizable even then. Felt the choice of placement not as a warm act of love for a child but as a precise engineering decision, the logic of it cold and clean. The blood wards need suffering to sustain at full strength. A loving home provides the blood connection but weakens the ward. A home where the child is miserable provides everything. He watched himself grow in fast forward, not the subjective experience of growing up but the external record of it, his magic in the Dragonline like a signal traced through years of compression. The suppression of the cupboard. The specific containment of a child's magic through systematic diminishment. Not abuse in the crude sense, Dumbledore hadn't wanted him broken, just shaped. Just made smaller than he was, more controllable, more dependent. The inscription in the dungeon. He saw it placed, felt the magical signature of its author clearly now, felt the quality of Dumbledore's spellwork, which was extraordinary. It really was extraordinary, the precision and care of someone who treated magic like an art form, and felt the intention behind it. Cut the child off from the Dragonline before he arrives at Hogwarts. Prevent the bond from reaching its full expression. Keep him manageable. Keep him useful. He watched the prophecy. Felt the shape of it in the Dragonline. Prophecies left traces, reverberations, the magical equivalent of a shout in a stone room, and felt how it had been used. Not just as information but as a design brief. Neither can live while the other survives. And someone had read that and thought, I need a child who will die for this. I need to make sure he will. Not a soldier. A sacrifice. Harry came back to himself on the grounds of Hogwarts with his hand still on Myra's foreleg and the October morning cold and clear around him. His legs were steady. His breathing was steady. The ember in his chest was burning very low and very constant, not hot but permanent, the kind of heat that doesn't flare because it doesn't need to. He stepped back from Myra. Dropped his hand. Hermione was watching him. Her expression was careful, she was reading him the way she read complex texts, looking for what was there rather than what she expected. McGonagall's expression was different. She'd seen the white in Harry's eyes during the connection, the full ember glow of the Dragonline fully active, and she knew something significant had happened even without knowing the content. Harry, she said. I'm fine, he said. He looked up at Myra. How long have you known all of it? Since before you were born, she said. The Dragonline records. It does not intervene. We watched, and we waited, because some things must be lived before they can be understood. And now? Harry said. Now it has been lived, she said. Now it can be understood. And now, the gold eyes were steady and enormous, it can be answered. Harry looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the version of himself this was supposed to produce, the bewildered, grief-damaged child who would cry in Dumbledore's office and accept comfort from the man who'd engineered the need for it. He thought about what it meant that that version had never arrived, that in its place something that had spent 6 years being educated by the oldest creatures on the planet had shown up instead. He almost felt sorry for Dumbledore's surprise. Almost. The conclave, Harry said. They're ready? They have been ready, Myra said, since the morning I felt the dungeon inscription go dark. He nodded. He looked at Hermione, who was already writing in her notebook with the focused concentration of someone who considers documentation a sacred function. He looked at McGonagall, who was looking at Myra with an expression that had several things happening in it simultaneously, awe, calculation, and something that looked, faintly, like the specific relief of someone who has known something was wrong for a long time and has just been told they weren't imagining it. Professor, Harry said. How much did you know? McGonagall looked at him. A long pause. I knew the placement was Alba's decision, she said. I argued against it. I watched Privet Drive for a single day and wrote to him that the Dursleys were, that it was not a suitable environment. She paused. He said the blood wards required it. He was right about the requirements, Harry said. Wrong about the acceptability. McGonagall's expression did something complicated. Yes, she said, quietly. He was. I'm going to need your help, Harry said. Not against him, necessarily. But I need someone on the inside who knows what's happening and isn't working against it. She looked at him for a long time. She looked at Mira, who regarded her with those ancient gold eyes and the absolute stillness of something that does not hurry and does not beg and does not negotiate. What will happen? McGonagall said. The conclave will issue a formal declaration, Harry said. All species, formal record, into the wizarding legal framework that recognizes dragonkind as sovereign entities. They've been legally recognized since the Magical Creatures Act of 1694. A conclave declaration carries the weight of a foreign power's declaration of grievance. He'd looked this up. Hermione had helped. Dumbledore will have to answer for specific decisions, the placement, the suppression inscription, the prophecy's use. Formally. And if he doesn't? McGonagall said. Then we answer for him, Mira said, and even through the translation it was very clear what that meant. McGonagall absorbed this. Then she straightened, the full, precise straightening of someone putting on armor they've had for years and are choosing to actually use. What do you need from me? Access to the Historical Records Office, Harry said. The school's bound magical record, every major spell cast in or on the castle is logged. I need the dungeon inscription in the official record. Dated. Attributed. Hermione looked up from her notebook. The records office is in the 6th floor archive. McGonagall has access. I know, Harry said. McGonagall looked between them. You've been planning this for some time. Since the night in the dungeon, Harry said. We document everything before we move. That's the rule. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Your mother, she said, planned in exactly that way. She was absolutely infuriating to argue with. Harry held that for a moment. Filed it somewhere warm. I'll have the records by Thursday, McGonagall said. I'll say I was conducting a routine ward audit. Which I should have been doing more regularly, it turns out. Mira stayed on the grounds for 3 hours. Word spread through the castle with the speed that any visible dragon on school ground situation would generate, a ripple of noise and movement, students crowding windows, several running to the grounds despite McGonagall's sharp commands to return inside, Dumbledore emerging from the castle and walking down the front steps with the measured calm of someone deciding how to approach a situation they don't fully control. Harry watched him come. Dumbledore reached them and stopped at a respectful distance from Mira. He looked at her with the expression of a man who understood exactly what her presence meant and was already several moves into how to manage it. Mira, he said, and he knew her name, of course he did, he knew everything, that was part of the problem. This is a surprise. Mira looked at him. She said nothing. The gold eyes were steady and held absolutely nothing warm. Dumbledore looked at Harry. The warm blue gaze was still warm, still genuine in its way, but underneath it was something sharper now, something that had been recalibrating rapidly since the moment the dungeon inscription dissolved. I think, he said gently, we should speak. We should, Harry agreed. But not privately. Not anymore. Dumbledore paused. Harry, I know about the inscription, Harry said. I know about the placement. I know about the prophecy and what you decided I needed to be prepared for, and how you decided to prepare me. His voice was completely level. Not angry, the anger was there but it was banked behind something more useful than anger. I know you believe you're doing what's necessary. I know you believe it so completely that you've never seriously questioned it. Dumbledore's expression went through several things quickly. The recalibration. The genuine pain, it was there, Harry thought, some part of Dumbledore that had always been capable of feeling this as loss rather than strategy. And then the managed version of both of those things, the face of someone deciding how to present what was happening. "You are very young," Dumbledore said, gently, which was a move Harry had expected. "I was 5 in that cupboard," Harry said. "The age didn't bother you then?" A silence. Myra's gold eyes were on Dumbledore with the absolute quality of attention of something that has made a judgment and is seeing it confirmed. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Whatever he was about to say, and Harry could see him considering several things, he stopped. Something behind his eyes was moving, some genuine conflict, the specific conflict of a man who has been certain of his own righteousness for so long that encountering a clean, specific, unanswerable statement of harm is genuinely disorienting. "We will speak," he said finally. "When you are ready." "Thursday," Harry said. "After Professor McGonagall has run her ward audit. In your office. With a witness." He looked at Mira. "She will attend. Remotely." He didn't say how, he didn't need to explain that through the bond Mira would hear everything, feel the truth of everything, and that the dragon line would carry the record of it. Dumbledore looked at Mira. She looked back. He turned and walked back to the castle with the dignified pace of someone who is not retreating and is very conscious of appearing not to retreat. Harry watched him go. "You did not tell him everything you know," Veyra said. "No," Harry said. "I told him what he needed to know to stop underestimating what's coming. That's enough for now." "You are very like a dragon sometimes," she said, with satisfaction. "Good," he said. He looked at Hermione, who had filled 6 pages of her notebook and was now looking at him with an expression he'd learned to read as the one where she wanted to say something important but was deciding how to frame it. "Say it," he said. "Quirrell," she said. "If the Conclave Declaration creates a public confrontation with Dumbledore, and Voldemort is already in the castle, whoever controls the Declaration's timing controls what Voldemort does in response. He'll accelerate." Harry looked at her. "When did you work that out?" "Yesterday," she said. "I couldn't sleep." "She's right," Neville said, from behind them both. He had come quietly from the direction of the greenhouses, he'd known about the meeting and apparently decided to be available without being in the way, which was exactly what Harry would have hoped for if he'd thought to ask. His hands were dirty with soil, which meant he'd been working rather than just waiting. If someone's using Quirrell to get to the stone, and the stone becomes more urgently necessary, because something threatens Voldemort's other plans, Hermione finished. "Then the stone becomes a problem faster than we're ready for it," Harry said. He thought about it. The timing of the Conclave Declaration, the Quirrell situation, the Philosopher's Stone in the castle. 3 variables that interacted. He needed them to interact in the right order. "We can't let him get to the stone," Hermione said. "He won't," Harry said. "But I need to be sure of the protection sequence first." He looked at Neville. "The Devil's Snare modification, does it respond to Veyra's heat signature as hostile or familiar?" Neville thought. "Familiar, now." I checked the ward interaction notes. The original inscription that keyed it as hostile was the same type as the dungeon anchor, keyed to your bond mark. With the anchor gone, the modification defaults to neutral. He paused. "It'll still react to anyone without a bond signature as hostile. Which is everyone going through that trapdoor except me," Harry said. "And anyone with you," Hermione said carefully. "And anyone with me," Harry agreed. Thursday came with the particular weight of days that have been moving toward something for a while and have finally arrived. McGonagall appeared in the Gryffindor common room at 7 in the morning with a folder of documents and an expression that suggested she had not slept particularly well and felt that was justified. "The records office," she said, sitting across from Harry at the table where he and Hermione were already up and waiting. "The dungeon inscription is logged in the castle's bound record. Date of placement, summer 1981. 2 months before the Potters went into hiding. She laid the documents on the table. The magical signature on the inscription is a match for the headmaster's spellwork on record. Hermione took the documents and began organizing them with swift precision. "There's more," McGonagall said. She was looking at Harry with the expression of someone who has found more than they were looking for and is deciding how much to tell a child. Then she appeared to decide that he was not the kind of child that approach worked on. "The blood wards on your aunt's house. I requested the original ward documentation through the Ministry's historical archive. The formal specification for those wards, including the supplementary condition regarding the emotional environment of the protected individual, was written by Albus personally. It's in his handwriting. The suffering clause was not a necessary consequence of the ward type. It was added. The common room was very quiet. The fire crackled. Veyra's ember eyes were fixed on the documents. It was added," Hermione repeated. "Flat. Precise. Deliberately specified," McGonagall said. "There are standard blood ward implementations that function perfectly adequately on blood connection alone, without requiring environmental suffering. He chose the variant he chose." Harry looked at the documents. He felt the thing he'd been keeping very steady since Myra's vision, the cold, banked, permanent thing that wasn't anger but was its mature relative, settle deeper into itself, more solid than before. "I need those documents," Harry said. "They're yours," McGonagall said. "I've made copies for the school record as well." She paused. "Harry. What is going to happen?" "The conclave meeting is tonight," Harry said. "Mira, Grathan, and 3 others. I'll be present through the bond. After the meeting they'll draft the formal declaration and it goes to the Ministry. Fudge will try to suppress it," McGonagall said. "He can't," Harry said. "Dragonkind has been a recognized sovereign entity since 1694. A formal conclave declaration of grievance against a specific wizard for specific harm is a legal proceeding. It goes into the Ministry's required record the moment it's filed, regardless of whether the minister wants it there." He looked at her. "I checked." "Of course you did," she said. Then, very quietly, "I'm sorry. For my part in it, for not pushing harder when I wrote that letter. For accepting his explanation." Harry looked at her. He saw the genuine weight of it in her expression, the specific guilt of someone who had deferred to an authority they trusted and been wrong to. "You argued," he said. "That matters. You were outvoted by the most powerful wizard in Britain who was completely certain he was right." He paused. The error wasn't trusting him once. It's staying silent after the evidence accumulates. He held her gaze. "Don't stay silent anymore." She held herself very still for a moment. Then she nodded once, with the finality of a decision made. The conclave meeting happened in the Highlands, 100 miles north of Hogwarts, in a valley old enough that the dragon line ran through it like a river through its own bed. The valley had always been there, the dragon line had always been there, and the conclave had been meeting in it since before there was a Scotland to be north of. Harry was there through the bond. Not physically, his body was in Gryffindor Tower, cross-legged in the chair by the fire, and Veyra was beside him with her eyes closed and the bond running fully open between them. But through the dragon line his presence was in that valley as clearly as if he'd operat, his bond mark visible and specific in the network. Grathan was already there when the connection opened. Harry had met him only once, briefly, when he was 6, the ancient Norwegian Ridgeback patriarch, scarred and enormous, whose horn-ridged head was the first elder face he'd ever seen. In the dragon line, Grathan's presence was like a cliff face, absolute, massive, older than the concept of compromising about things that mattered. "Harry Potter," Grathan said. His voice was nothing like Myra's music. It was more like the sound large stones made when they moved against each other. "You have the documents?" "McGonagall obtained them this morning," Harry said. "Signed, dated, attributed." The ward specification with the suffering clause in Dumbledore's hand. The dungeon inscription in the castle's bound record. The prophecy text and the documented decisions made in response to it. Good, Grathan said. Shuriai arrived then, the Chinese fireball matriarch, whose presence in the dragon line was entirely unlike Grathan's cliff. She was current, quick, copper-bright, her attention moving through the network like light across water. She examined the documents Harry had provided through the bond with the swift thoroughness of someone used to processing large amounts of information at speed. "This is sufficient," she said. "More than sufficient." Thalnax, the Ukrainian Iron Scales elder, came next. His presence was the slowest and the heaviest, like the dragon line itself becoming denser in one place. He said nothing in greeting. He read the testimony. The documents. Myra's vision, which she shared through the network in full. Then, this happened to a child. Yes, Harry said. While he was already the survivor of an attempted killing, Thalnax said. Yes. A silence in the dragon line that had the quality of something very large and very old deciding something. Akarath came last. The ancient stoneback of the Andes, whose voice in the dragon line was so low it was felt rather than heard. Harry had never met Akarath before, had only known of the species from texts, ancient wingless mountain dragons, living stone made mobile, older than most of the other species' lineages combined. The stoneback's presence in the dragon line was not like the others. It was more fundamental. Like a geological stratum. Like the load-bearing wall inside the wall. Akarath said nothing for a long time. When it spoke, the dragon line vibrated with the word for so long after the word ended that Harry felt it in his back teeth. "Begin," it said. The declaration took the form of formal testimony, each member of the conclave presenting their specific grievance, the entire record going into the Dragonline's memory as spoken truth rather than written record, which was the most binding form of documentation in dragonkind law and which had been held by every wizarding legal tradition since 1694 to constitute incontrovertible evidence. Mira gave the vision. Every detail of every choice. Clear and exact. Grathan gave the statement of harm, the specific, enumerated damage done to a bond-marked individual, which under the Magical Creatures Act was equivalent to a declaration of harm against a sovereign entity. The dungeon inscription specifically, catalogued with the precision of someone who has been thinking about this since the night it went dark. Shuriai gave the contextual record, the wider pattern, the way the individual choices connected into a design, the specific use of Harry's suffering as a tool for a specific magical outcome. Thalnax gave the testimony of the dragon line itself, the record it carried of what had been done, available for any legally constituted inquiry to verify. Akarath spoke last and briefly, and what it said was the formal declaration in its oldest form, a statement that had not been made since the 1690s and whose weight in the dragon line was enough that Harry felt it through his bones from 100 miles away. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Akarath said. By the testimony of the Conclave of Five, by the record of the dragon line, by the bond right of Harry James Potter, bonded of the Shadowfire Drake Veyra, this conclave declares formal grievance. Let the record be opened. Let the accountable answer. The declaration filed itself into the Dragonline's record. From there, under the 1694 Act, it would automatically register in the Ministry's Creature Affairs Department in the morning. There was no suppression. There was no appeal process before registration. It simply was, the way stone simply was, the way weather simply was. Harry came back to himself in Gryffindor Tower. The fire had burned low. Hermione and Neville were both awake on the other side of the fireplace, neither of them pretending they hadn't been waiting. Veyra opened her eyes. The ember of them was very bright in the dim room. Harry looked at his friends. "It's done," he said. "The declaration was filed tonight. The Ministry will have it by tomorrow morning." Hermione exhaled slowly. "What happens then?" "Fudge panics," Harry said. The Department of Magical Creatures tries to figure out what to do with a conclave declaration they've never seen before. Someone will owl Dumbledore. He paused. And then we go to the headmaster's office and we have the conversation that was always coming. Neville said, "Are you ready for that?" Harry thought about the white of Myra's vision. His mother's magic in the air over Godric's Hollow. The dungeon inscription and its date. The ward specification with the deliberate, specific suffering clause in Dumbledore's handwriting. He thought about a 5-year-old in a hollow with a wounded dragon, pressing his palm to a torn wing because it seemed like the right thing to do, and the door that had opened then that had never closed since. "I've been ready," Harry said, "for 6 years." He looked at Veyra. She looked back. The bond between them hummed with the fullness it had had since the dungeon, the complete resonance of a connection no longer partially blocked, and through it he could feel the conclave dispersing in that ancient highland valley, and the dragon line settling after the declaration the way water settled after a stone, and the enormous, patient certainty of 5 elder dragons who had made a decision and would not unmake it. And further, fainter but present, the shape of something that had not been there before the declaration, dozens of other dragon presences in the dragon line, from the Welsh coastline to the mountains of Romania, from the Scottish highlands to the steppes of Russia. Not just the conclave. Not just the elders. All of them. Every species. Every lineage. Aware of what had been declared. Aware of what it meant. Aware of Harry. He sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. The responsibility of it. Not heavy in a crushing way but heavy in the way of things that matter, the weight that tells you something is real. "Get some sleep," he said to Hermione and Neville. "We're going to need to be sharp tomorrow." Hermione looked at him. "Harry." "Yes?" "For what it's worth," she said, and her voice was quieter than usual, the precision softened to something more direct, "the person who did those things to you was wrong. Not strategically. Not tactically. Wrong." She held his gaze. "And the fact that you're sitting here having done all of this, having planned all of this, instead of being the frightened dependent version he was trying to make, that's not just impressive." She stopped. Seemed to decide to finish the sentence. "It's the best evidence I've ever seen that people don't have to become what someone tried to make them." Harry looked at her. The ember in his chest did something warm and quiet and nothing like fire. "Thank you," he said. She nodded and went to bed. Neville followed, pausing at the dormitory stairs to look back at Harry with an expression that said several things without any of them being words, and then he went up too. Harry sat alone with the low fire and Veyra beside him and the dragon line alive and full and open beneath everything. Tomorrow, Dumbledore. Tonight, the fire. He watched it burn. Chapter 5, When Dragons Declare War. The Ministry owl arrived at breakfast. Harry knew it was coming, had felt the Ministry's magical signature on the move through the dragon line since 6 in the morning, the specific quality of institutional magic trying to process something it had no existing protocol for. The owl came through the great hall's high windows with the other Morning Post, landed in front of Harry's plate, and deposited a crisp official envelope with the Ministry seal before departing with the efficiency of something that wanted no part of whatever came next. Harry opened it, read it, and passed it to Hermione. She read it twice. "They want you in the Ministry today," she said. "Department of Magical Creatures. They're calling it an emergency consultative meeting." "Fudge is on the header," Harry said. "The minister himself." "That was fast," Neville said, across the table. "The declaration registered automatically at midnight," Harry said. "They've been awake since then." Down the table, the morning noise of the great hall continued, plates passing, conversations overlapping, the twins conducting what appeared to be an experiment involving levitating marmalade. But the staff table was different. 3 professors were very clearly not eating their breakfasts. McGonagall was reading something. Quirrell's turban was turned away from the hall entirely. And Dumbledore, at the center of the table, was reading an identical ministry envelope to Harry's with the contained composure of a man receiving news he expected and had been preparing for. He looked up and found Harry's eyes across the full length of the great hall. Harry looked back. Something passed between them, not the management and assessment of their previous encounters, but something simpler and less comfortable. An acknowledgement. The specific recognition of two people who have been in an implicit conversation for a long time and have just agreed to make it explicit. Dumbledore inclined his head very slightly. Harry returned to his breakfast. "You're not going to the ministry," Hermione said. It wasn't a question. "I'm 11, Harry said. "I have classes. Fudge can come here." Neville made a sound that was not quite a laugh but was in the vicinity. "Can you actually tell the Minister of Magic to come to you?" "I don't see why not," Harry said. "He's the one who wants the meeting." He sent the reply with a second-year's owl. His own was not trained for ministry correspondence yet, and wrote back simply that he was a student in the middle of his first term and would be available on the Hogwarts grounds at 4 o'clock if the minister wished to discuss the conclave declaration in person, and that the elder dragon Mira would also be present as the declaration's primary witness. The response arrived 40 minutes later. 4 o'clock. Minister Fudge and an unnamed advisor. "The unnamed advisor is almost certainly Dumbledore's man in the ministry," Hermione said. "Probably Umbridge," Harry said. "She handles creature affairs." Hermione's expression indicated she'd done enough reading to have opinions about Umbridge. She didn't share them, which was probably sensible given that they had a full day of classes to get through first. Classes proceeded with the particular quality of ordinary days that have significant evenings attached. The hours had a slightly unreal texture, the routines of charms and transfiguration running correctly but shallowly over the larger thing underneath. Harry paid attention in every class out of principle and because he found that genuine engagement with the immediate thing was always better than being absent in the present while worrying about the future. Hermione clearly operated on a similar principle. Neville was more visibly distracted but compensated by being exceptionally precise about his herbology repotting in the afternoon, which suggested he handled tension with productive physical work. During lunch, Draco Malfoy walked past the Gryffindor table and stopped. He didn't sit down. He stood at the edge of the table with the specific posture of someone who has decided to do something and is experiencing the slight physical awkwardness of the decision-meeting execution. His usual group was a few steps behind him, watching with various expressions of confusion. "The conclave declaration," he said to Harry, quietly enough that it didn't carry down the table. "My father will have received a copy." "I know," Harry said. "He'll come here. Let him." Draco looked at him steadily. Something was working in his expression, the conflict Harry had glimpsed by the Quidditch shed, the same unresolved question. He supported Voldemort because he believed it was the right alignment for the family. For power. He still believes the declaration is leverage. He stopped. He's going to try to use it. How? Position himself as a mediator, Draco said. Between the conclave and the ministry. The Malfoy family has historical treaty relationships with the Gringotts goblins and 2 recognized creature affairs contacts. He'll try to insert himself as the person who resolves this, which gives him influence over the outcome. The words were precise and exactly reported, the way someone reports intelligence rather than expresses personal feeling. Then, more quietly, "He's wrong about what this is." Harry looked at him. "What do you think it is?" Draco met his eyes. "It's not leverage," he said. "It's a reckoning." He paused. "There's a difference." "Yes," Harry said. "There is." Draco held his gaze for another second. Then he turned and walked back to the Slytherin table, and his group fell in around him in the slightly puzzled way of people who hadn't understood the interaction but trusted Draco's judgment enough not to question it. Hermione watched him go. "He warned you," she said. "He did," Harry said. "Why?" Harry looked down at his plate. Thought about standing by a Quidditch shed in the dark and the specific quality of someone trying to work out which parts of their inheritance to keep. Because he's figuring out who he is, he said. And some part of him has decided that whatever that is, it's not the person who watched something wrong happen and said nothing. Hermione considered this. Is he trustworthy? Not completely. Not yet. He looked at her. But he told the truth just now. That's a start. At 3:45, Harry walked down to the grounds. Hermione and Neville came without being asked, which was what he'd expected and wanted. McGonagall was already at the bottom of the front steps, wearing her good robes with the specific intentionality of someone suiting up. Mira was at the tree line, exactly where she'd been before, the same profound stillness, the morning frost long gone and the afternoon light making her scales shift between gray and deep green. The ministry delegation arrived at 4 exactly, which told Harry that Fudge was nervous enough to be punctual. The minister was a round, pompous-looking man in a lime-green bowler hat that he wore with the aggressive confidence of someone who had made a decision about the hat and intended to see it through. Beside him was a woman with a wide, fixed smile and pink robes that matched nothing about the situation. Harry had been right about Umbridge. A step behind them both was the unnamed advisor, who turned out not to be Umbridge's office at all but was instead Lucius Malfoy, arriving with precisely the smooth timing that Draco had predicted, wearing his ministry consultant credentials like a weapon. Harry noted him. Filed him. Kept his expression mild. Fudge saw Harry first and his face went through the calculation that Harry was used to by now, the celebrity recognition, the reassessment, the specific slightly panicked quality of someone who expected a child and has gotten something that isn't quite giving them the footing they expected. Then Fudge saw Mira. To his credit, he only stopped walking for 3 steps before recovering. Ah, he said. Yes. Quite impressive. Minister, Harry said. Thank you for coming. Mr. Potter. Fudge's smile was the professional kind, all surface. I must say, this whole business is, well, it's quite irregular. The conclave declaration, the filing, we haven't had a declaration of this kind since 1692, Harry said. The Cromwell-adjacent persecution of magical creatures. Which the ministry eventually resolved by paying significant reparations and codifying the 1694 Act. He held Fudge's gaze. I know the precedent. Fudge's smile strained slightly. Umbridge didn't change at all, which was somehow worse. Of course you do, Fudge said. Bright boy. Your parents, I need to ask, Harry said, pleasantly, that we dispense with the personal warmth and speak about the actual matter. I have homework. A pause. McGonagall made no sound whatsoever but something about her posture communicated that she found the homework comment appropriate. Lucius Malfoy spoke. He had a smooth, measured voice that carried the specific quality of wealth so established it didn't need to announce itself. Mr. Potter. I believe you know who I am. Lucius Malfoy, Harry said. Former supporter of Lord Voldemort, current ministry consultant, father of Draco. He paused. Here to offer yourself as mediator, I imagine. Lucius didn't react to the directness. He was too practiced for that. The Malfoy family has extensive relationships with recognized creature affairs contacts. I can be useful in, you can't, Harry said. The declaration isn't a negotiation. It's a legal proceeding. Mediators are for negotiations. Everything is a negotiation, Lucius said, with the smooth confidence of someone for whom this has always been true. Not this, Harry said. And then he looked past Lucius to the tree line, to Mira, and said through the bond, Grathan. From the forbidden forest, moving with the specific unhurried quality of something that doesn't need to hurry because its arrival is not in question, Grathan emerged. Even Lucius Malfoy took a step back. Grathan was significantly larger than Mira. The Norwegian Ridgeback patriarch moved onto the grounds with each footfall landing like a decision rather than a footstep, his horn-ridged head at 20 feet high in a resting position, the old scars on his flanks reading like a history in raised silver lines. His eyes, when they found Lucius Malfoy, were the color of deep water in winter. "Merlin's beard," Fudge said, very quietly. Lucius had recovered his composure. It took him 4 seconds, which Harry noted and respected minimally, but the step back had been real and they all knew it. His jaw was set. His cane, Harry noticed, had a particular quality about its head that suggested it was not only a cane. "Lucius Malfoy," Grathan said. Harry translated without inflection, "He knows your name." "Many people know my name," Lucius said, but his voice had an edge in it that hadn't been there before. "You stood at the Dark Lord's side," Grathan said, "and called it political necessity. The dragon line has a long memory, Malfoy. Longer than your family's records." Harry translated. Lucius's face was very controlled and very still. "Tell the dragon, Elder," Harry said. "He's the Norwegian Ridgeback patriarch. Elder Grathan. The honorific matters." Lucius looked at him. Something moved in those pale eyes, assessment, recalculation, and something that might, underneath everything else, have been a kind of respect for the specificity of the correction. "Tell Elder Grathan," he said, "that the Malfoy family's political history is not the subject under discussion." "Everything," Grathan said, "is under discussion when I choose it to be." Harry didn't translate that one. He didn't need to. Grathan's tone carried itself. Fudge had been looking between all of this with the expression of a man watching a table of cards he thought he was playing turn out to be a table of cards everyone else has been playing for much longer. "Mr. Potter," he said, and for the first time the professional warmth was thinner than the genuine uncertainty underneath it. "What exactly is it you want from this? The declaration is, it's been filed, I understand that, and we take the conclave's legal standing very seriously, but surely there's an outcome you're seeking." "Something we can," the declaration names Albus Dumbledore, Harry said. "For specific, documented decisions. The Ministry is required by the 1694 Act to open a formal inquiry." "An inquiry into Albus Dumbledore," Fudge said, in the voice of someone testing whether the words can be made to sound reasonable and finding they can't quite get there. "Yes." "Harry," Umbridge said, and her voice was the specific warm sweet of something made to sound like honey by something that wasn't, "I'm sure you appreciate that Professor Dumbledore has given his whole life to the safety and well-being of the ward specification," Harry said. He looked at her with the specific quality of someone who doesn't hate you but finds you entirely irrelevant. "The one filed with the blood ward, in his handwriting, with the deliberate suffering clause. That document is now in the Ministry's required record as part of the conclave filing. It can't be unfiled." He paused. "I'm sure you appreciate that." Umbridge's smile didn't falter but something behind it went flat. The standoff lasted another 40 minutes. Harry answered questions with the patient precision of someone who has thought carefully about exactly what needs to be on the record and exactly what doesn't. McGonagall intervened twice, both times with the specific authority of a Hogwarts professor speaking on school grounds to Ministry officials who were guests, not authority figures here. Mira and Grathan were largely silent, their presence was the argument, they didn't need to add to it. By the time Fudge left, looking significantly more worn than when he arrived, 3 things had been accomplished. The Ministry inquiry was formally on the record, verbal confirmation given by the Minister himself in front of witnesses, Lucius Malfoy's mediator positioning had been neatly foreclosed, and the specific documents at the heart of the declaration were confirmed received by the Ministry's Creature Affairs Department. Lucius Malfoy lingered a moment after Fudge and Umbridge had moved toward the apparition point. He looked at Harry with the expression of someone genuinely uncertain which move to make, which was probably a rare state for him. "My son spoke to you," he said. "Many people speak to me," Harry said. A pause. "He's not wrong about some things," Lucius said. "Not warmly. Not an apology. More like a fact being placed on a table to see what it did there. About the difference between leverage and reckoning. Harry looked at him. No. He's not. Lucius held his gaze for a moment. Then he turned and walked away, and his footsteps were precise and unhurried on the frost-cold grass, and Harry watched him go and thought about what Draco had said about figuring out who you were and which parts of your inheritance you kept. Like father, like son, maybe. Just a generation behind. The meeting with Dumbledore had been set for the following morning. Thursday. 8 o'clock. The same time as the first meeting, which felt intentional on Dumbledore's part, an anchor in normalcy, a suggestion that this was continuous with the management of things rather than a break from it. Harry arrived early. He was in the office before Dumbledore came in from the inner door, sitting in the same chair as before, Veyra on his shoulder, the folder of documents on the table in front of him. The portraits were awake and watching. Fawkes, on his perch, looked at him with the deep ancient patience of a bird that had been sitting in this room through multiple headmasters and knew what mattered and what didn't. Dumbledore came in. He was dressed as always, robes that managed to be both magnificent and comfortable, the half-moon spectacles, the white beard arranged with the natural ease of someone who had long since stopped thinking about it. He looked at Harry. He looked at the folder. He sat down. "You've been busy," he said. "Yes," Harry said. "A beat." "Then, the Ministry is opening an inquiry." "They confirmed it yesterday," Harry said. "Fudge." Verbally, on school grounds, in front of McGonagall, Hermione Granger, Neville Longbottom, and 2 members of the Dragon Conclave. He paused. "It's in the record." Dumbledore looked at the folder. "May I?" Harry pushed it across the desk. Dumbledore opened it. He read. He was, Harry had always thought, a man who read with his whole face. The information moved across it like weather, controlled but not entirely suppressible. He read the ward specification and something happened briefly around his eyes. He read the dungeon inscription record in his hands, resting on the desk beside the folder, went very still. He finished and closed the folder and was quiet for a moment. "You understand," he said, "that everything I did was done with the intention of keeping you alive." The voice was even. Not defensive in a combative way, more like someone laying down a foundation they consider load-bearing. Voldemort had to be stopped. "The prophecy, I know the prophecy," Harry said. "I've read it. Neither can live while the other survives." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "That's about me and Voldemort. It doesn't say anything about suffering. It doesn't say the person who fulfills it has to arrive at it having been deliberately kept small. A child who knows his own power, is not a weapon," Harry said. "Is a person." He kept his voice level. "You made choices that caused harm. Not as collateral damage, specifically, deliberately, with a documented, specified intention. The suffering clause in the ward specification isn't ambiguous. You needed me to suffer in order for a specific magical mechanism to work at maximum strength, and you arranged for me to suffer, and you signed it." Dumbledore was quiet. His expression was not the managed warmth of their previous meetings. It was something older and heavier, the specific gravity of a man who has been certain of his own righteousness for so long that genuine challenge registers as physical weight. "I believed it necessary," he said. "I know you did," Harry said. "That's the thing about you. You always believe it. That's what makes it so much worse than if you'd just been cruel." He paused. "Cruelty knows it's cruelty. What you do doesn't know it's cruelty. It thinks it's wisdom." Dumbledore looked at him. For a long moment, nothing managed. Just the two of them, and the weight of it. "What do you want, Harry?" he said, and it was the first time he'd asked rather than assumed, and the first time his voice had no management in it whatsoever. Harry had thought about this answer carefully. He'd thought about it in the woods when he was 10, and in the dungeon when the anchor went dark, and in Gryffindor Tower after Myra's vision. He'd thought about every version of it. "I want the stone out of this castle," he said. "It's not safe here. Quirrell is being used to get to it and the current security is inadequate, and I think you know that." Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "How do you? Two magical presences in one body," Harry said. "Veyra can sense it. There's something attached to Quirrell. I don't need to tell you what it is, you've known it was coming." A pause. "Yes," Dumbledore said. Second, Sirius Black. The Conclave's declaration creates a legal platform for reviewing magical creature testimony, and Sirius Black was incarcerated without a trial. The Dragon Line carries a record of that too. "I want a trial." Dumbledore's expression shifted. "Sirius Black is my godfather," Harry said. "The only family member I have who didn't choose to treat me as a problem to be managed." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "I want a trial." Dumbledore was very still. "Third," Harry said. "No more management. No more tests. No more sharpening stones." He leaned forward slightly. "If there's information I need about Voldemort, about the prophecy, about anything that concerns me directly, I get it directly. Not filtered. Not timed for when you think I'm ready. Not parceled out to keep me dependent on you as the source." The portraits were very quiet. Even the ones who usually muttered to each other. Fawkes made a low, musical sound from his perch. Dumbledore sat with it for a long time. "The stone," he said finally. "It can be moved. I'll contact Nicholas today." He paused. "Quirrell will need to be managed." "I'll leave Quirrell to you," Harry said. "For now. But I want him away from students before Christmas." "And Black." Dumbledore said the name with the weight of something he'd filed in a specific place and not revisited. "A trial would require the political situation with Fudge. Fudge is going to be cooperative with me for the foreseeable future," Harry said. "Given the Ministry inquiry." He kept his voice neutral. "I'd suggest moving quickly, while the cooperation is current." Dumbledore looked at him. And there it was, finally, something Harry hadn't seen in him before. Not defeat. Not submission. Something more honest than either of those. The specific expression of someone who has been shown, clearly and completely, the shape of what they've done, and who is old enough and self-aware enough to know that the recognition is real and the argument against it insufficient. "You are," Dumbledore said quietly, "nothing like what I expected." "I know," Harry said. "That's the point." He stood. Picked up the folder. Veyra's claws settled briefly deeper into his shoulder, a small pressure of presence. "I don't hate you," Harry said, at the door. "I want you to know that. You're not a villain to me. You're someone who was wrong about something important and kept being wrong about it because you never let anyone show you the evidence." He paused. "The evidence has been shown. What you do with it now is yours to decide." He left. The Great Hall at dinner was the social equivalent of a weather event. Word had moved through the school in the way that significant things moved through contained communities, not as fact but as story, layers of truth wrapped in speculation. The Ministry visit was known. Mira and Grathan on the grounds was very much known. Something involving Dumbledore and Harry Potter was known, in outline if not detail. Harry ate his dinner and let it move around him. The announcement came from Dumbledore between the main course and pudding. He rose, and the hall went quiet with the automatic attention of a community that had been conditioned to attend to him, and what he said was brief and specific and clearly cost him something in the saying of it. "I wish to inform the school," he said, "that the Ministry of Magic will be conducting a standard review of several administrative decisions I made in the autumn of 1981. This is routine and appropriate and I support it fully." He paused. "I also wish to inform you that the Philosopher's Stone, which has been housed in this school for security purposes, will be relocated to a more suitable facility. The school remains entirely safe. A murmur through the hall. Questions suspended in it. Dumbledore sat down. He looked at his plate. Not at Harry. Harry watched him for a moment. Thought about what it cost someone like Dumbledore, who had been large, who had been right, who had been the authority since before most of the people in this room were born, to sit down after saying that. To make the acknowledgement public. It was not redemption. It was not sufficient. But it was the beginning of being answerable, and that was something. Hermione touched his arm briefly. Harry. He turned. She was holding a letter that had arrived with the Desert Owls, official ministry parchment, and her eyes were doing the thing where they were very bright and very precise at once. He read it. Read it again. The Ministry of Magic, Department of Magical Law Enforcement, hereby informs Mr. Harry James Potter that a formal review hearing for Mr. Sirius Orain Black, case number 7762/B, has been scheduled for the 14th of November, 1991. Mr. Black will be transferred from Azkaban to Ministry Holding for the duration of the review. All interested parties are invited to present evidence. Signed, Amelia Bones, Head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Amelia Bones. Not Fudge's office. The DMLE directly. Neville was reading over his shoulder. Is that, Sirius Black, the one who was said to betray my parents? Harry said. Yes. He put the letter down. His hands were completely steady. He didn't. He looked across at the staff table. Dumbledore was looking at his pudding. He had moved the stone removal and the Sirius review in less than 12 hours, which meant he'd had both ready, had been waiting to see if the conversation that morning would resolve in a direction where releasing them was strategically sound. Still managing, Harry thought. But managing toward the right things now, and under the right pressure. It was a start. Under the table, Veyra moved from his jacket pocket to his knee and stayed there, warm and present, the bond between them running full and clear. The conclave is satisfied, she said. For now. For now, Harry agreed. There's still Voldemort. Yes, she said. But he is not what Dumbledore is. She paused, in the way she paused when something required care in the saying. Dumbledore is a lesson. Voldemort is a conclusion. Harry looked at the room around him, the long tables bright with candlelight, the enchanted ceiling showing the November stars, the hundreds of students with their hundreds of futures and the castle old and massive and genuinely alive around them all. He thought about what Voldemort in the back of Quirrell's head meant. He thought about the Horcruxes. Mira had given him that impression in the Highland Valley, the Dragonline's record of split soul magic, each piece its own suppression of something that should be whole. He thought about what Dragonfire did to objects that shouldn't exist in their current form. He thought about Quirrell specifically. About what happened when you removed the parasite and the host had nothing left holding it together. Not tonight, he told Veyra. No, she agreed. But soon. Soon, he said aloud, quietly enough that only she could hear. He looked at Hermione. I need everything you can find on soul magic, he said. Specifically the magic of deliberate soul fragmentation. It's in the restricted section and you'll need McGonagall to sign the access request. Hermione looked at him. The bright precise thing in her eyes intensified. You know what he is, she said. Not a question. I know what he's done to himself, Harry said. And I know what undoes it. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she opened her notebook and started writing a research list with the focused efficiency of someone who has been handed a significant problem and considers significant problems a worthy use of time. Neville, quietly, what do we need to do? Harry looked at him. At Hermione. At Veyra on his knee with her ember eyes reflecting the candlelight of the great hall. He thought about the dragon line and the dozens of presences in it, the enormous patient awareness of dragonkind watching through the bond, the specific certainty of Akaratha's deep geological voice saying begin. We need to find every piece, Harry said. And burn them. Chapter 6, The last old magic November came in cold and purposeful. Hermione worked through the restricted section like weather through an open window, systematic, thorough, leaving nothing unexamined. McGonagall had signed her access request without asking what it was for, which said something about where they all were now. By the end of the first week Hermione had 3 notebooks filled and a theory about Horcrux destruction that she laid out on the common room table on a Friday night with the focused intensity of someone presenting findings they wish they hadn't found. Soul magic of this kind, she said, requires an anchor. Something physical. The fragment attaches to the object at the moment of creation, a deliberate murder, performed with specific intent, and the object becomes structurally intertwined with the fragment. You can't remove the fragment without destroying the object. She looked at Harry. And standard destruction methods don't work because the soul fragment actively resists. It has a survival instinct. What destroys it? Neville asked. Something that destroys the object at a level below its physical structure, Hermione said. Not just the material but the magical essence. The basilisk venom in the Chamber of Secrets diary, which I found a reference to, there's a reason that diary couldn't be restored after it was stabbed, works because it destroys magic itself. She paused. Fiend fire. And, she looked at Harry, shadow fire. Harry looked at Veyra. Veyra looked back. The ember eyes were steady. You knew, Harry said. We knew, she said. Shadowfire burns what should not be. It is why the species was hunted, not for our scales or our blood. Because we were the only thing that could unmake certain objects. Certain people tried to make themselves permanent. We were the answer to that permanence. She confirmed it, Harry said to Hermione. Shadowfire is one of the destroyers. Hermione exhaled slowly. Then we need to find them. All of them. The diary Draco mentioned his father has, the diary is the one Voldemort had Lucius carry, Harry said. Which means Lucius knows what it is, or at least knows it's significant. He thought about Lucius on the grounds, the specific quality of someone placing a fact on a table to see what it did there. He'll use it as leverage. Or he'll try to. He might give it up willingly, Neville said. Everyone looked at him. If the alternative is being on the wrong side of the Conclave Declaration while also being linked to an object that proves ongoing Death Eater activity. He paused. The inquiry gives him a reason to distance himself. The diary is liability, not asset, once the inquiry is public. That's excellent thinking, Hermione said, with the genuine approval of someone who respects good reasoning regardless of source. Neville looked slightly startled by the approval. Harry had noticed this, the way Neville sometimes received recognition like it was an object he wasn't sure he was allowed to keep. He was getting better at it. Slowly. There are 6 others, Harry said. Beyond Quirrell's situation. He'd been counting them up through the bond, using the Dragonline's impression of split soul magic to locate the resonances. Each Horcrux left a specific quality in the Dragonline, a wrongness, a note that didn't resolve, like a chord with one string tuned flat. The diary. Something in the Gaunt family ruins in Little Hangleton, a ring, I think. Something large and old in Hogwarts itself, I can feel it under the Slytherin common room. A cup, Hufflepuff's, from the feel of it, somewhere with Gringotts' involvement. A locket. And the snake. The snake, Hermione said. Nagini, Harry said. She's with Voldemort's current form. I can feel her in the Dragonline, she's been partly made into something she shouldn't be. Hermione was writing rapidly. That's 7. Including me, Harry said. A silence. Neville looked at the table. Hermione's pen stopped. I felt it in Myra's vision, Harry said. He kept his voice completely matter-of-fact, because the fact required matter-of-factness. The night Voldemort's killing curse rebounded, the soul was already unstable, he'd already made multiple Horcruxes. The rebound shattered a piece of what was left, and the nearest magical container was me. He paused. There's a fragment of Voldemort's soul behind my scar. The fire crackled. How, Hermione said carefully, do you remove it without destroying the container? Harry finished. That's the problem. He looked at Veyra. She thinks she can extract it without destroying me. It's a specific kind of application, shadow fire at a temperature that affects the soul fragment without affecting the host's magical signature. She says she's done something adjacent to it before. I have not done this exactly before, Veyra said. No one has done this exactly before. But the principle is sound. She says the principle is sound, Harry said. The principle, Hermione said, in the tone of someone who respects principles and is deeply uncomfortable with how much weight is currently on one. I trust her, Harry said simply. Hermione looked at Veyra for a long moment. Veyra looked back with her ember eyes and the complete stillness of someone who has considered a problem from every angle available to them and is confident in their conclusion. Hermione put her pen down. Okay, she said. Okay. Walk me through the extraction mechanics. They worked until 2 in the morning, Hermione asking questions and Harry channeling Veyra's answers and Neville making tea at some point, which was practical and kind, and by the end of it they had a sequence. Not a comfortable sequence. Not a sequence with no risks. But a sequence with each step grounded in something that held. The order mattered. The scar fragment had to go last, after Quirrell, after the diary, after the others were dealt with. Because each destruction of a Horcrux made Voldemort's hold on the remaining one slightly more desperate, slightly more present, and the scar fragment would respond to that. Do it last when the others were already gone and the fragment was isolated rather than networked. But first, Quirrell. Harry went to see Professor Quirrell the next morning. Alone, which Hermione objected to with the specific quality of someone who has thought of 3 compelling arguments and is deciding which to deploy first. Harry heard all 3. They were good arguments. He went alone anyway, and left Veyra in the corridor outside the classroom with instructions to come through the door immediately if she felt anything through the bond that wasn't right. Quirrell was at his desk when Harry came in, marking papers, his turban present and his nervous hands moving over the parchment with the jittery precision of someone whose control of their own body had become a managed performance rather than a natural state. He looked up. The 2 presences that Harry felt through the bond, the surface one, nervous and diminished, and the deep one, cold and old and deeply wrong, both noticed him. P. Potter, Quirrell said. Office hours are, I know when office hours are, Harry said. He sat down across from the desk. I'm not here for office hours. The deep presence stirred. Harry felt it in the bond, a cold attention, something that had been dormant becoming aware of him, recognizing him, and the recognition was not the recognition of a threat encountered. It was the recognition of a thing that had been waiting for him specifically, a fixed point in its own plans, a piece it had always expected to see again. Harry met that attention with the full warmth of the bond, the dragon line running strong under everything, the conclave's awareness at the edges of it, Veyra's ember steady in his chest, and what he felt in return was something he hadn't expected. Surprise. The cold thing behind Quirrell's eyes had expected fear or defiance or the specific anger of an abused child come to confront a monster. What it found instead was a boy sitting in a chair with complete calm and something vast and ancient running through him, and the surprise was genuine and total. I know what you are, Harry said, to both of them. He kept his voice conversational. What's happened to you, Professor Quirrell, is not your fault. I want you to know that. You went looking for Voldemort and he took you, and the person you were before that is still in there. He paused. But I can't let this continue. The cold presence pushed forward. Quirrell's body went rigid, the nervous tremor stilling into something deliberate, and when he spoke the stutter was entirely gone. Harry Potter, the voice that came out said. It was the specific voice of something very old that had been patient for a very long time. You are not afraid of me. No, Harry said. You should be. Maybe, Harry said. But I know what you are, and I know what you've done to yourself, and I think you're much less powerful than you once were specifically because of what you've done to yourself. He tilted his head. The Horcruxes. How does it feel? Knowing that each one made you less. More fragile. More dependent on borrowed bodies and borrowed power. A silence. Then, with the controlled fury of something that has been made to hear an accurate thing it wanted not to hear, you know about the Horcruxes. I found them, Harry said. Through the bond. Dragonline impressions, you left marks, every single one of them. Soul magic at that scale doesn't leave quietly. He held the cold gaze. They're being dealt with. One by one. The diary first, I think, since it's the most accessible. Voldemort's presence surged, Quirrell's hand slammed flat on the desk and his eyes went fully red and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in 2 seconds, and the cold attention was now fully present in a way it hadn't been before, not dormant anymore but complete and furious and pressing against the edges of Quirrell's borrowed body with everything it had. Harry didn't move. Through the bond, he felt Veyra in the corridor. Present. Ready. Not moving yet. I was going to be merciful, Voldemort said, through Quirrell's mouth, with the specific contempt of someone who has never understood why mercy would be offered and therefore assumes it must be weakness. I was going to kill you quickly. Out of respect for what your mother did. You're not capable of mercy, Harry said. You gave it up with the first Horcrux. He stood. I'm not here to fight you. Not today. I'm here so you know that I know, and that what's coming is coming regardless of what you do in this room. He looked at Quirrell's face, the red eyes, the wrong body, the borrowed presence of something that had made itself into fragments. And so you know that the boy you've been planning around, the frightened weapon, the carefully managed child, that boy doesn't exist. Voldemort was quiet. The red eyes didn't blink. What's coming for you is old, Harry said. Older than you, older than me, older than Hogwarts. You made yourself into a thing that shouldn't exist. Old magic disagrees with things that shouldn't exist. He reached the door. I'm sorry for Professor Quirrell. I'm not sorry for you. He walked out and closed the door behind him. Veyra was immediately on his shoulder, her claws settling in, the bond running with a fierce heat that was her anger expressed in the only way he needed. That was dangerous, she said. I know, he said. You antagonized him deliberately. Yes, he said. He needed to know the parameters have changed. That changes how he moves. He started walking, quickly, toward McGonagall's office. And it means he'll accelerate toward the stone before it's moved. Which means we need to deal with Quirrell before the stone is relocated, not after. That is extremely optimistic about our timing. That's why we're running, Harry said. He wasn't running yet, technically, but he was walking at the specific pace that was the preparatory speed for running, and Veyra's claws tightened in and her wings half spread for balance, and in the bond he felt the dragonline hum with a quality he'd come to know as the conclave paying sharp attention. McGonagall was out of her office. He found her in the corridor outside Dumbledore's, which meant the conversation he needed her for was already half arranged. He knocked on the headmaster's door without slowing and pushed it open and went in. Dumbledore was there. McGonagall was there. And Snape was there, which Harry hadn't expected, standing by the window with his arms folded and his expression doing several things at once. Harry, Dumbledore said, rising. We were about to, Quirrell is about to move, Harry said. He knows I know about the Horcruxes. He'll try for the stone tonight. The room went very sharp. Snape, by the window, uncrossed his arms. He was looking at Harry with the expression Harry had seen in potions, the involuntary sharpening of someone who has filed something away and is now retrieving it. You confronted Quirrell. I informed him, Harry said. Deliberately. He needed to move now, on our timeline, rather than on his own. Snape's expression did something that in anyone else might have been called impressed, and in Snape came out as a very controlled study in neutral assessment. That's either tactically brilliant or catastrophically reckless. Both are possible simultaneously, Harry said. Professor Dumbledore, the stone needs to be removed tonight, not in the morning. Quirrell will make his move after midnight when the castle is quiet. Dumbledore was already moving toward his desk, reaching for something. Agreed. I'll contact Nicholas immediately. He looked at Harry. The protections, I know the sequence, Harry said. I've known it since October. He looked at all three of them. I need to be at the third floor tonight. When Quirrell goes through. Absolutely not, Snape said, immediately, and with the specific quality of someone whose objection is not procedural but genuine. I'm not asking for permission, Harry said. Not rudely, the distinction mattered to him. I'm informing you of my plan so we're coordinated. You and I want the same thing tonight, Professor. We both want Voldemort out of this castle. Snape looked at him. The mention of Voldemort didn't make him flinch the way it made most people flinch. It made something in him go very still instead, the stillness of someone who carries something heavy and does not intend to put it down. Your mother, Snape said, and the two words carried approximately 17 things in them, none of which were going to be unpacked in this room tonight. He stopped. She wouldn't want you in danger. She chose danger, Harry said. I know that. I'm not doing this because of her. I'm doing it because Voldemort is in my school and he needs to leave. He held Snape's gaze. I can handle what's on that third floor. You know what I have. A long pause. Snape looked at Veyra, who looked back. The ember eyes were absolutely steady. Don't die, Snape said, which was, Harry understood, the specific version of support that Snape was architecturally capable of. I'll do my best, Harry said. At midnight, Harry was on the third-floor corridor. Hermione and Neville were not with him. This had been an argument at 9 o'clock, in the common room, in hushed but intense terms, and Harry had won it not by pulling rank or being dismissive of their capabilities but by making the specific argument that the sequence of events tonight required one person who could interface directly with Dragonfire, and that was him, and having them in the corridor increased the variables without increasing the advantage. He'd promised to tell them everything after. He'd meant it. They'd accepted it with the specific look of people who disagree with a decision but respect the reasoning. Veyra was full-sized. Not cat-sized, not crow-sized. Full-sized, which in the corridor meant she filled most of the available space, her wingtips brushing the walls on both sides, her head touching the ceiling, her scales so black in the torchlit corridor that she was visible mostly as the shape of absent light. She was very quiet. She was very ready. The fluffy problem resolved itself with the specific practicality of someone who had spent 6 years in proximity to dragonkind. The three-headed dog took one look at Veyra and made the decision that all three heads could agree on, which was that this corridor belonged to whoever it belonged to, and backed against the far wall with a triple whimper. Harry gave it an apple from his pocket, which he'd brought specifically, because the dog was not the enemy and didn't deserve distress. Fluffy ate all 3 apples with 3 mouths simultaneously and wagged its tail with the cautious optimism of something that wasn't sure if it was allowed to enjoy itself right now. The trapdoor. Down through the devil's snare, which parted for Harry and Veyra immediately, Neville's analysis confirmed, the bond mark reading as known, and through the key room, where the winged keys swirled away from Veyra's wingspan like startled birds, and through the chess room, where the pieces took one collective look at a full-sized dragon and stood aside. Troll in the next room, already unconscious, which meant Quirrell had come this way already. Recently. The potions room. Hermione's kind of puzzle, which Harry appreciated with the specific appreciation of someone who values other people's kinds of intelligence. He found the right bottle, drank, moved forward. Through the last door, into the mirror room. Quirrell was there. He was standing in front of the mirror of Ariste and his hands were raised toward it and the turban was already unwinding, the cold presence was fully in control now, no more nervous tremor, just the specific controlled fury of something that has been without a body for a decade and has a task to complete. He hadn't heard them come in. Or hadn't chosen to acknowledge them. "The stone isn't in the mirror anymore," Harry said. Quirrell spun around. The room was large. Veyra filled the back third of it, her wings folded close, her head low, her eyes pure white. The silver-white light of her was the only light in the room, and it fell on Quirrell like a cold version of sunlight, and in it the wrongness Harry had felt through the bond was visible even without the bond, the doubled presence, the two things in one space, the specific wrongness of a body being used as an object. "Potter," Voldemort's voice said, through Quirrell. "The stone was moved 2 hours ago," Harry said. "Dumbledore contacted Flamel this afternoon. It's gone." Something in Quirrell's face moved, not the cold thing's emotion but Quirrell's, underneath, a faint expression of something that might have been relief before the control snapped back over it. "Then you have come here for nothing," Voldemort said. "I came here for you," Harry said. Veyra moved. Not fast, she didn't need to be fast, in this space, against this opponent. She moved with the specific deliberateness of something that knows it has the advantage and is not performing. She put herself between Harry and Quirrell, and her eyes were white and her mouth was open, and the silver-white fire that gathered in her throat was not the small plume of the common room or the brief flash of the grounds. It was the full expression of what she was, and the temperature in the room jumped 40 degrees and the mirror behind Quirrell cracked from heat differential and the cold presence at the back of Quirrell's eyes flinched. It flinched. Harry had never seen Voldemort flinch before. He filed it. "What do you think that does to me?" Voldemort said, but the voice had something in it that hadn't been there before, a thread of something that was not quite fear but was the calculation that preceded the decision whether to be afraid. "It burns what shouldn't exist," Harry said. "Soul fragments shouldn't exist. Objects shouldn't be made into Horcruxes. And wraiths shouldn't inhabit stolen bodies." He looked at Quirrell's face, not at the red eyes but at the face around them, the human face, what was left of it. "Professor Quirrell. Are you still in there?" A pause. Then, in a voice that was neither the stutter nor the cold control but something between them, something strained and small, "Yes." "Then I need you to do something," Harry said. "I need you to push whatever you have left, toward the surface. As hard as you can." He kept his voice level. "You can do it. The thing using you has been wearing you down but it hasn't replaced you. You're still there." "Don't listen to him," Voldemort said, the cold voice cracking through the strained one. "He's lying to you," Harry said to Quirrell. "He's been lying to you since Albania. He told you this would make you great. You know what it's made you." Silence. Then Quirrell's hands, both of them, shaking violently, came up to his own turban and gripped it. The cold presence surged. The temperature dropped back suddenly, Veyra's heat meeting something else, and the stone floor cracked in a line between them and the mirror exploded and the room went dark except for the white of Veyra's eyes and the fire gathering in her throat. "Now," Veyra said. Not to Harry. To the thing in Quirrell. She breathed. Shadowfire hit the room in a controlled column, not a blast, not a wave, but a precise, directed stream aimed at Quirrell's silhouette, silver white and absolute, and it was nothing like normal fire in the way it behaved. Normal fire destroyed materials. Shadowfire moved through materials as though materials were not the point, as though it was aimed at something more fundamental than the physical. Voldemort screamed. It was not Quirrell's voice. It was something else's, something that had not made a sound out of its own need in years, a sound like the specific agony of something permanent discovering it was not permanent after all. The cold presence tore loose. Harry felt it in the bond, the ripping quality of it, a soul fragment that had lived in borrowed flesh suddenly exposed, suddenly without anchor, suddenly confronted with the full warmth of the dragon line and the specific, ancient, uncompromising quality of shadowfire that burned things that should not be. It dispersed. Not fled, dispersed. Like fog in full sun. Like a note played at the wrong frequency for the medium. Quirrell collapsed. Harry was beside him before he hit the floor, one hand catching him, the man's body alarmingly light, alarmingly hollow feeling, like something that had been used as a container for so long that the original contents had diminished. His eyes were his own, brown, ordinary, frightened, and for the first time in months entirely his. "You're all right," Harry said. "It's gone." "Gone," Quirrell repeated. Just the word. Like verifying a fact. "Gone," Harry confirmed. Quirrell looked at him. He looked at Veyra, who had folded her wings and reduced the fire and was watching with her ember eyes back to orange, warm rather than white. He looked at the cracked floor and the shattered mirror and the room that was still 20 degrees warmer than it had been and smelled of electricity and old stone. "I am going to be sick," Quirrell said, with the specific dignity of someone managing a physical reality they consider beneath the importance of the moment. "That's fine," Harry said. "Let's get you out first." Dumbledore was in the corridor at the top of the trapdoor with McGonagall and Snape. They'd clearly been waiting. Snape had the specific posture of someone who has been waiting in a corridor with anxiety he has no intention of admitting to, and McGonagall had her wand out. Dumbledore looked at Harry and at Veyra and at the unconscious and then semi-conscious Quirrell, and the question in his face was answered before he asked it. "He's free," Harry said. "Voldemort's presence dispersed. The fragment is gone." "Gone," Dumbledore said. "Shadowfire," Harry said. "It burns what shouldn't be." A pause. Dumbledore looked at Veyra, who looked back with the unhurried authority of something that has just done what it came here to do and is entirely at peace with the doing of it. Something moved across Dumbledore's face, the specific expression of a man encountering evidence that the power he'd been managing and measuring for a decade was not actually manageable in any sense he'd understood. "The stone?" McGonagall asked. "Already with Flammel," Harry said. "Dumbledore had it moved." She looked at Dumbledore. He nodded. She exhaled, not with relief exactly, but with the particular quality of a person recalibrating toward a possible good outcome they hadn't been sure of. Snape had taken Quirrell from Harry's support without making any particular point of it, simply doing the practical thing, settling the man's weight against his arm with the focused competence of someone who has tended to consequences before and will do so efficiently. He looked at Harry over Quirrell's head. "The fragment in the scar," Snape said. "Not tonight," Harry said. "The sequence matters." Snape held his gaze. Something in his expression shifted, not softened, exactly, but reconfigured into something less armored. "Your mother was also frustratingly methodical about magical sequencing," he said. Harry held that for a moment. "I'll take that as a compliment." It was. They were the two words that cost Snape the most to say in that sentence, and they both knew it, and Harry nodded once and let it be enough because it was. The days following Quirrell's hospitalization in St. Mungo's moved with the specific momentum of things finally going correctly. The Sirius Black Review hearing was November 14th. Harry spent the week before it preparing testimony with Hermione, whose understanding of wizarding legal procedure had become comprehensive enough that she occasionally corrected the sample documents she'd found for outdated precedent. The Dragon Line gave Harry access to the record of Peter Pettigrew, the truth of the betrayal, the specific moment, the faked death and the living rat. It wasn't admissible in a wizarding court directly, but what it provided was the shape of where to look, and Amelia Bones turned out to be the specific kind of rigorous that liked being shown where to look. They found Pettigrew in Azkaban intake records. He'd been a ministry clerk for 2 years in the late 80s, using a different name, the paper trail thin but real once you knew what you were tracing. Bones' people found the trail in 4 days. Harry was in Bones' waiting room at the ministry on the morning of the 14th when the escort brought Sirius Black in. He'd prepared for this. He'd read about Azkaban. He'd known that 12 years in proximity to Dementors produced specific and severe damage, that the man coming out would not be the man who had gone in, that the meeting would be difficult in ways he needed to be ready for. He was not entirely prepared for the specific sight of him. Sirius Black was thin in the way of someone from whom something fundamental had been taken and had not yet been returned. His hair was long and matted, his robes ministry issue and wrong on him, his eyes, grey, his mother's eyes, Harry had read, and he had his mother's eyes, moving around the waiting room with the specific rapid quality of someone whose threat assessment instincts were firing constantly because Azkaban trained you to never stop threat assessing. Then his eyes found Harry. He stopped moving. Harry stood up. He didn't say anything. There wasn't a right thing to say in the first 4 seconds of this, and he knew it, and he let the 4 seconds be what they were. Then Sirius said, in a voice that was rough from disuse, and underneath the roughness was something else, something that had been kept alive in 12 years of cold and darkness because some things refused to stop, "You look like James." "I know," Harry said. "I have my mum's eyes." Something happened in Sirius's face. A breaking open quality, controlled quickly, the specific grief of someone who has been carrying something for a very long time and has just been handed evidence that the thing was worth carrying. "She'd have hated the hair," Sirius said. His voice broke slightly on the last word and he didn't let it, pulling it back with the deliberateness of someone who has decided how they're going to be in this moment. "The hearing's in 20 minutes, Harry said. "Bones has Pettigrew's trail. You're going to be all right." Sirius looked at him. "How did you?" He stopped. His eyes went to Veyra, who was on Harry's shoulder and had been watching him since he walked in with the specific quality of attention she reserved for people she'd decided were significant. "That's a dragon." "Shadowfire Drake," Harry said. "Her name is Veyra. She found me when I was 5. Sirius stared at Veyra. Veyra regarded him with ember eyes. The warmth that moved through the bond was the specific quality Harry associated with recognition, Veyra reading the shape of someone's magic and finding it known. "He smells like your father," Veyra said. Harry translated. Something in Sirius Black's expression broke completely open and came back together in a different order, and he looked at Harry, really looked, the way you looked when you weren't processing anymore but simply seeing, and said, "You're all right." "Yes," Harry said. "They told me," he stopped. "Dumbledore said you were." "I know what he said," Harry said. "It was calculated. It doesn't matter now." He held Sirius's gaze. "What matters is the hearing, and after the hearing, what comes next." He paused. "I need a guardian. A legal one. I need to not live at Privet Drive anymore." Sirius stared at him. "I haven't been, Harry, I'm not in any state to. I'm not asking for perfect," Harry said. "I'm asking for willing." He looked at him directly. "Are you willing?" The question sat between them. Sirius looked at the ministry waiting room walls, at the official posters and the maintenance charms and the evidence of the institution that had put him away without a trial and kept him there for 12 years. He looked at Harry, at the boy who had his brother's eyes and his sister's composure and something else underneath both, something that was entirely its own thing, something that had spent 6 years being raised by dragons and had arrived at this waiting room at 11 years old, having already taken down a Voldemort-possessed professor and filed a legal grievance against the most powerful wizard in Britain. "Yes," Sirius said. "Obviously yes." The hearing took 3 hours. Bones was precise and thorough. Pettigrew's trail was presented. Snape, whose testimony about the actual events of 1981 turned out to be considerably more useful than anyone had expected, spoke with the controlled fury of someone who has been waiting to say true things about Peter Pettigrew for a decade. The Dementor testimony, acquired through a conclave-adjacent process that Harry didn't fully understand but that Mira had arranged, the dragon line apparently intersecting with the Dementor's specific form of awareness in a way that could be translated to legal record, confirmed what the paper trail established. Sirius Black had never been the secret keeper. The secret keeper had been Peter Pettigrew. The betrayal had been Pettigrew's. The murders in the street had been Pettigrew faking his own death. 12 years. For something he hadn't done. Harry sat in the gallery and watched Sirius walk out of the hearing room a free man, and the specific quality of the moment, the weight of it, the wrongness of what had been done and the rightness of the undoing, settled in his chest next to Veyra's ember and stayed there. In the dragon line, very faint and far away, all 5 members of the conclave were present. Not urgently, more in the way of witnesses to a correct thing. Sirius came out into the corridor and found Harry waiting. He looked like someone who hadn't worked out yet what happened after this, which was reasonable. 12 years. The concept of after had probably required significant reconstruction. So, Sirius said. So, Harry agreed. What happens now? We find somewhere to live, Harry said. Preferably with a large property. Veyra needs space. Sirius looked at Veyra. Does she always look at people like that? Only people she's decided matter, Harry said. Sirius swallowed. Right. He looked at Harry. Grimmauld Place is mine. It's not ideal. Dark family house, portraits that shout, general atmosphere of sustained unpleasantness. But it's large. We'll fix it, Harry said simply. It's been in the family we'll fix it, Harry said again, and there was enough of the bond in the certainty of it, the specific quality of someone who has cleaned up worse things than a dark house and knows it, that Sirius stopped arguing and almost smiled. Almost. The scar fragment was the last piece. Harry had known for weeks that it was last and why it was last, and he'd known what the process would involve, and knowing hadn't made the waiting easy. Each Horcrux dealt with, the diary destroyed with Shadowfire in a controlled setting in early December, Lucius Malfoy having relinquished it with the specific efficiency of someone who had decided liability management was more important than sentiment, the ring from Little Hangleton, retrieved with Dumbledore's grudging assistance, the locket from a location in the Dragonline record that turned out to be Grimmauld Place itself, in a locked cabinet, which had been satisfying to find, the cup. With Gringotts' cooperation, the goblins proving rather more amenable to Dragonline testimony than the Ministry had been, each one had made the scar fragment more active. Not painful, exactly. More present. More aware. By the end of November Harry could feel it clearly. Not just the wrongness of it but the specific character of it, the fragment of Voldemort that had been lodged behind his scar since he was 1 year old, a piece of something that had never been his but had been in him, influencing things in ways he was only beginning to see clearly now that it was soon to be gone. He sat in Sirius's study at Grimmauld Place on the first Saturday of December with Veyra across from him and Hermione and Neville and Sirius arrayed at the edges of the room, not as audience but as anchor. "Walk me through it one more time," Hermione said. Not from doubt. From the principle that saying a thing aloud before doing it was always better than not saying it. "She targets the fragment specifically," Harry said. "It's a different application of Shadowfire from the room application, contained, precise. She goes through the bond connection rather than through external fire. It won't affect my own magic because my magical signature is fundamentally different from the fragment's. It will affect the fragment because the fragment is a foreign element. And if the targeting isn't precise enough?" Sirius said. He said it the way he said most things about this plan, which was with the expression of someone who has accepted something he wouldn't have chosen but is committed to it. "It will be," Harry said. Sirius looked at Veyra. She met his gaze with the specific steadiness of someone who understands they are being evaluated and finds the evaluation reasonable. He looked at Harry. "I've trusted worse odds for worse reasons," he said finally. "Let's go." It was not like what Harry had expected. He'd expected pain. He'd expected the specific difficulty of something foreign being removed from somewhere it had been for a decade. What he got instead was quiet, first. A deepening of the bond's connection, Veyra's presence in his chest becoming more present than it had ever been, the dragon line humming with a resonance that went all the way to its foundations. Then warmth. Moving inward rather than outward. Specific. Purposeful. He felt the fragment when Shadowfire found it, felt it in the way you feel a splinter when something is pressing it toward the surface rather than deeper. It was cold and angry and old in the specific way of something that had never been alive and had been pretending to be, and it pushed back against the warmth with everything it had, and everything it had was not enough against Shadowfire and the full force of the dragon line and 6 years of something ancient choosing Harry the way he'd chosen it. Doors open both ways, both sides, nothing held back. The fragment came free. It dispersed the same way the quarrel fragment had. Without drama. Without ceremony. Like something that was always temporary discovering the temporary was over. Harry opened his eyes. The scar was still there. He'd checked, later, in a mirror, same lightning bolt, same placement. But the quality of it was different. The wrongness was gone. It was just a scar, the record of a specific moment rather than the anchor of an ongoing horror. Hermione exhaled the longest breath Harry had ever heard from her. Neville said, "Oh, thank Merlin," in a heartfelt and completely undignified way that made Harry love him for it. Sirius said nothing. He crossed the study in 4 steps and put his hand on Harry's shoulder with the specific grip of someone making contact with something they were afraid of losing, and his jaw was tight and his eyes were not dry and he didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say. Harry let him. The Conclave's final declaration came in mid-December. Not a war declaration. The war declaration had been the opening of the formal record, the grievance filed, the accountable made to answer. What came in December was the resolution. Dumbledore had responded to the Ministry inquiry with full cooperation, which had been noted. The ward specification had been officially condemned and stricken from the approved variants list. The dungeon inscription had been formally expunged from the castle's record. The blood wards on Privet Drive had been dismantled by Ministry specialists, the house now just a house, the Dursleys just people who had made choices for which they would eventually have to account in the Muggle way that people accounted for choices without magic to hide them. Akarath spoke last, as always. "The record is open," it said, in the dragon line. "The accountable has answered. The bond marked is free of the fragment and whole." This conclave closes its formal declaration with the following final statement. A pause. Geological. The kind of pause that moved through the dragon line like pressure through deep stone. We do not forgive the harm done. We do not unsay the declaration. We say instead that the bond marked has done what was required, and more. He has not become what was made of him. He has become what he chose. This is noted. This is held in the Dragonline's record. This is permanent. The Shadowfire bond stands. Harry felt it through the connection, all 5 of them, the full conclave, their presence in the Dragonline making it luminous with old attention, and underneath them all the dozens of other presences he'd felt since the declaration. Dragonkind's collective awareness focused on this moment with the patience of something that measured time in centuries. He was sitting in the Gryffindor common room when it came. The fire was low and the room was quiet and Hermione was asleep in the other armchair and Neville had fallen asleep at the table with a herbology text open under his cheek, which Harry found so perfectly Neville that he didn't wake him. Veyra was on the arm of his chair. Full-sized, which didn't fit in the common room at all and which she managed by existing in it anyway, her tail curled around the hearth and her wings folded tight and her head at Harry's shoulder level. He looked at her. She looked back. Ember eyes. The deep, permanent orange of a fire that has been burning for a very long time and has no intention of going out. "We are whole," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "Voldemort is still out there," she said. "His main form. His last anchor is gone but he is not gone." "I know," Harry said. "He will come back." "He will," Harry agreed. "And when he does he's going to find something very different from what he's expecting." "What will he find?" Harry thought about that. He thought about a hollow in the woods and a wounded dragon and the door that had opened and never closed. He thought about Hermione asleep in an armchair with 6 notebooks on the floor beside her. He thought about Neville and a herbology text and a boy who'd been told he was small figuring out how large he actually was. He thought about Sirius Black in a ministry waiting room with 12 years of wrongness being corrected. He thought about Myra's music through stone voice and Grathan's cliff-face presence and the enormous, patient, unforgiving warmth of the conclave's awareness through the bond. He thought about a 5-year-old pressing his palm to a torn wing because it seemed like the right thing to do. "He'll find me," Harry said. Not the weapon Dumbledore was building. Not the sacrifice the prophecy described. Me. He looked at Veyra. And everything I chose. She made the thunder purr sound. It vibrated in his sternum. Home sound. Right sound. The sound of something that chose him back and had been choosing him back every day for 6 years and would keep choosing him for as long as there were days. Outside the Gryffindor windows the Scottish December was deep and cold and very dark, and somewhere in the Highlands Grathan was making slow circles in the night sky with the patience of something very old that had decided this particular story was worth watching, and further south Mira was in her old valley and the dragon line ran under everything like the deep pulse of the world itself, warm and full and open in both directions. Harry sat with his dragon by the low fire and didn't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow could come. He was ready.